Time, gentlemen, please. Time. Clear your lot, sling your up, get on out. This is the final Deshou the Third. Ladies, gentlemen, please welcome. I am Shadon, and joining me, of course, my fellow drinking buddy and partner in anime crime, it is the Soul Doctor.
Hello, hello, friends. Hope everybody is doing as well as they can be. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. Welcome to it's closing time at the bar known as Deshou the Third, and belly up to the bar and have a final drink with us. It's gonna be fun.
I'm going to be staggering there myself. They'll be slinging me out, mate. Beyond the streets, just completely and utterly sozzled in the brain. The lights are on, but nobody's home. The neurons are sparking, but nothing's working. Telling you.
That's far more destitute than I imagined you would be after this.
Well, no, not at all. I mean, it's kind of funny. It's actually kind of very much like a night out, which it starts strongly, and then it gets quite a bit of a lull, and you get a bit bored, and something like really just annoying happens. You think, oh, I can't be bothered with the rest of this. And then suddenly, something miraculous happens that just brings you right back up to where you started, and you feel pretty good at the end of it for the most part. So, hey, congratulations to Death Parade for swinging it back round and restoring my faith in the show and making me like it again after the previous block of episodes, which, well, I am the world champion with the honorary doctorate in watching paint drying, but even that was a test of my fortitude watching those previous ones. Hyperbolic though that may sound. But we're going to elaborate soon off on why I like these block of episodes more. Doc's to give his thoughts as well, of course. This being our Deshou the Third format, we will not be going into big detailed plot summaries apart from when, of course, the talking points require it. We're going to talk about creators, we're going to answer a couple of Patreon questions, and right at the top, before we do anything else, I also need to give a content warning. Because various events in these block of episodes reveal what happened to Chiyuki. So, content warning and spoiler in one. We will be discussing suicide in this. I certainly will. We'll be discussing, what leads people to do that. Mental health, trauma, that kind of thing. Just to make you aware, that will be coming later. So expect a substantial amount of discussion on that, because that's one of the it is actually part of the emotional and thematic climax of the show. It's unavoidable. Just something to bear in mind. Apparently we're also back to PowerPoint mode again, Doc, if there's anything you can do to...
No, I've read. I'm doing the best I can over here to make sure things are closed. I don't appear to be running anything particularly intense. I don't have too many tabs open. I don't know. Hopefully it gets better.
I mean, maybe he's telling the truth, and maybe he really is running 30 instances of Train Simulator. We'll never know.
Yes, exactly. Sorry.
We will never
shut down the botnet, the Bitcoin miner.
I mean, maybe you're just torrenting that Twitch leak before, so you can find out the earnings of all of the hottest streamers, like people who talk about WoW all day and people who yell a lot, like games when they don't need to. I'm not being judgy, I'm not being jealous, I promise you. But anyway, enough diversions, we'll get right into this. So we're, of course, covering Death Parade episodes 9 through 12. We're going to go, firstly, I believe, into... Shall we do a quick spoiler-free, quick summary of how we felt about the episodes? I mean, I think my feeling is perhaps clear, but I might want to broaden my analysis that a tiny little bit. Or do you want to go straight into the creative, Doc?
No, let's put out our broad feelings on the show. I feel like that's what we usually do. That makes sense.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll get this as quick as I can. I know that I am infamous for massively overrunning whenever I say that, but I'll sum up as briefly as I can. The revelation surrounding Chiyuki and everything that happens between her and Desmond in the final 3 episodes is great. It is the best part of the show by a long shot. It justifies the show's existence and its expansion into a full-blown show, albeit, in my opinion, I will end up concluding that I think this would have worked better as a 6-episode show or an OVA or whatever you want to call it. rather than a full-blown 12-episode one. But nonetheless, a stellar finale, a stellar conclusion for her story, along with the revelations that come with that. The stuff that happens with Mayu and Harada, which happens, if I recall correctly, in episode 10, it'll come as no surprise to people who listen to our previous podcast that, my heart did not grow 3 sizes that day. It's just, I just watched it and it just kind of washed over me. You know, I was just like, whatever. But I do have a spicy take later on that particular scene and that conclusion to their little journey there. But overall, if you want my opinion on them, they could have been ejected from the show without too much consequence, in my opinion, as allowing more time to focus on Chiyuki and Desim, which is what really, really matters. But otherwise, overall, a strong end to a show that I think needed a lot more focus, a lot more tightening. It does justify its expansion from the Deaf Billiards short, the concept, to an actual show. But I really do feel like at times they just meandered around into nonsense that wasn't all that interesting, amusing, or relevant. But when this show goes to the home run, by God, does it go for the home run?
Do you think? Well, did it go for a home run for you? Like, where did you end up feeling about it? Like, I guess we'll rate the show later.
I thought episode 11 was absolute.
Well, I mean, the show as a whole, sure.
Okay.
I mean, unless you want to save it for later.
I'll save it for later, but I think that in the end, like, I like the show overall, but as I say, I think it really did need a whittling down. It needed a paring down of all the gristle and crap that was bundled onto, like, I would have ejected Mayu, I would have ejected Harada, I'd have ejected Oculus. We introduced him. Wait until I talk about that. Wait until I talk about that hydrogen.
We're more of a Vive podcast. We're on into these Facebook virtual reality visors.
Oh, well, his virtual reality visor is, plant-based. It's entirely organic, as it turns out. Yeah, I'd ejected him from the show. Honestly, I think, as I say, like, I like it.
They're gonna kill him, focused. But then his brother PSVR will swoop in to take him. I'm sorry.
The real villain of this, the real villain of this will be Kinect. Let's be fair.
Yes, yes, you're right. You're right.
So,
oh my God.
Anyway, I think that you could have ejected so much from the show and just cut it down to a 6-episode series, an OVA thing, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the proper acronym for this, but you know what I'm referring to.
Sure. I mean, either one works. Yeah.
And at that point, I think you would have had a really killer show that actually does have things to say about how we view life and living. Things that, with the benefit of hindsight, might seem a little obvious, but I think in this show's particular articulation of that topic, it's really, really good in the end. Just wish it didn't fanny around to get to there.
Oh man. Well, stall for like one more second while I try something to help the stream.
Certainly.
This helps out.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, I will say this though. I would very happily play a Death Parade VN. I reckon that could be really interesting if it got expanded out to that. I'm also a little tempted to say, like, if you did do such a VN, you'd have all of the actual games be mini games, and that's partly because I've been this is my sideways thing into mentioning I've been playing Yakuza 0 recently because I've picked up for like £4.
I know,
and it's a treat, absolute treat a game. But I was playing darts yesterday, so yeah. Do a VM where you get more games in. Like, how about we have like the poker arc where it's like a battle royale of like 12 people or whatever, playing poker against each other. And the Stacey and Harry, they're all like really meshed together and linked together in some way. And you can really delve into that. Some crazy stuff. Like, you could do all sorts of amazing things with that, I reckon, if you expand it as a VN. But yeah, I also suppose I could rampantly speculate on who Oculus is, and the honest answer is I ain't got a fucking clue. I don't want to get into talking points just now because I'm going to save that for later. But yeah, whatever was happening with him and Nona in the end of the show, I can't. I don't recall much of it, and I don't think it really matters, to be quite honest. They essentially start commentating various parts of what's happening in episodes 10 through 12, where Oculus is like, "Oh, he shouldn't be having emotions," and Noah's like, "No, no, it's fine. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you senile old fart." And I'm like, I don't give a I don't give a shit about any of this. I don't care about this discussion. I like Nona well enough, but I do not give a crap about Oculus because I don't know anything about him. But I'll save that for later.
All right. Well, Rackham says that we're looking better, so thank goodness.
Did you adjust the repurposed coat hanger that serves as the TV aerial? Were you holding up in the back?
Yeah, I
nice.
You know, you couldn't tell on screen, but my lower half was like a cartoon character, like stretching, creeping all the way across the room, and had to give it a swift kick to point it north.
Beep 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 boop beep boop like that. You can get that, by the way, folks. That one's free.
Okay. Here's my take. I feel really bad.
Oh my! Is this going where I think it's going? Oh shit, son. Okay, do tell.
I feel really bad because the show did not land for me.
Oh,
in the end.
Stop.
And I think it did take all 12 episodes for me to like really determine that.
Oh, and shit.
This, like, I feel bad because I know the show means a lot to different people. And I see, I see like the power that could be in it for someone. I mean, certainly like the topics covered are very, it's very primal, right? And the show is not like, it's not like how do I say, like sophomoric or too edgy or like surface level. Like, it has kind of things it wants to say that don't really fall into those categories. But I don't know, man. I think to really like appreciate this show, you have to be thank you, Rackham, the reverse Uno card. Yes, it's true. Feels like that happened. I think you really have to be super invested into Deshou and Chiyuki as characters and in their relationship. And I can't really say that I was. I think I just didn't get into them. And so it's not that I felt nothing like seeing the resolution of Chiyuki's arc and seeing Deshou kind of break out of his shell and learn things and grow. But it all felt to me very sort of, we've been here before with anime. Like, it felt very like, here's the standard like arty anime, a cut above your traditional shonen fare. Like, here's sort of the points we're going to cover and the lessons we're going to expound. And I think the things that it did say, I think to me, what I got from it anyway, the things that it were saying are said better in other anime and said more creatively, more originally, with more force in other anime. And I'm also annoyed at the things that the show didn't try to do that it felt like it was leading toward. I am kind of just like annoyed with anime who seem to like bring up the idea that the status quo is very bad and then return to it at the end, not really changing very much of anything. It just is like the acknowledgement of it is just not enough for me right now to feel satisfied with the story. It's not to say that like in someone's personal journey reading stories or absorbing texts that idea by itself is like invaluable, because it is. It's like a step, but man, I just really thought like something would come of all this exposition and thematic weight, the idea that like the kind of moral system as it stands is very arbitrary, very unfair, and just kind of didn't really do anything there. You know, Nona seemed to like have her theory she believed in. Oculus seemed to just not believe in it still. Decim continued to be an arbiter and judge, although he seems to have a little bit of a different idea of judging. But it doesn't really, to me, move the ball that far forward. And, Chuki was judged and she left, and she's now just another dummy in his closet. You know what I mean? And like the stuff with Mayu and the boy, I can't remember his name. What's he called? Harada? Yeah, in Genti's bar was like an interesting, but it never really, I don't know, went beyond interesting. Like it was kind of neat, like what happened. Like and there's a lot of, I guess, ways you could interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you have a spicy one. I'm very interested to hear what it is. But yeah, I mean, like the whole, like Chiyuki relearns everything about her life in the end and says like, fuck it. Human beings can't understand each other. It's not even worth it to try to understand each other. But like that felt like a really weird move on her part. I mean, I know she was like mentally like distraught from relearning everything, but I mean, consider all the things she just witnessed, like everything that she just did at the end of episode 9. Like it just seemed to be such like a really backwards kind of move for her to do that. And then, by the way, Gogo, James Beckett has recommended The Good Place to me. Is very high on that show. What was I saying? What was this? Yeah. Like I really, and then Chiyuki learns like, oh, well, it's like we should try to understand each other. And I mean, it's cool. Like I see what the show is trying to do, and I see how you could look at it and feel a lot about it. I just didn't feel it, man. Like it just wasn't. It just did not resonate with me.
That's fair. I have two things to say to what you said, and this is not to disagree with you all, but rather I think just something to expand on your points.
Sure.
The first of which is when you said about the idea of the protagonist or protagonists realizing the corruption or fallibility of the system they operate in. Like you live in a society and yet you participate in it. Very curious. That plot point, as it were. It reminded me of two shows that I have seen, one recently and one less recently. And I think there's a key difference between those shows which do that better than they do in Death Parade. And the shows I'm referring to, the older one is Psycho-Pass. And the later one, which was much more recent, was 86 Season 1, which I actually watched in full. Both very good. Well, Psycho-Pass is good, but anyway, that's a discussion for a different day. And 86 is really good, shockingly so. I thought it was going to be, hey, you've got your Nazi analog waifu here, enjoy. And well, thankfully not. But anyway, point being is that both, without spoiling too much, the lead characters in both shows do learn the corruption, the flaws, the immorality of the systems they operate in, but they actually have an overt realization of that, and they continue to operate inside those systems in spite of it, knowing that they can't simply just click their fingers and change it overnight, but they recognize it regardless. And I don't think even Death Parade goes quite that far, because the person making the realization of all of that is probably more Chiyuki than Decim in these episodes. but she's only a transient person in this story in the end, which I think is fine for her as a journey, actually, and I'll explain why later. But Decim basically continues doing what he does, and he doesn't actually ever, I think, have a like his criticisms of the fallibility of the system are entirely internalized about his own false judgments, rather than I was made in such a way and made this way to do a specific purpose, which is to get through this really fucking fast. It's like almost as if Oculus is operating as a Terry Pratchett villain, where he's really interested in getting through all the bureaucracy really quickly, at the expense of the beauty of people's lives. But even as I say, that's why I think there's a distinction there between like Decim and characters. I can't remember the lead character's name from Psychopaths, but it's Lena from
Akane, the lady.
Yes, you're right. Thank you. Mushroom Bull lady, voiced by Kate Oxley in the dub, if I remember. She's a fine English voice actress. That's just the point. So that's one thing I would say, and I'm here open to you disagree or disagree. But I think for me, like the fact it doesn't even make that recognition is a problem. But there's something else I need to know that I think is more important with respect to how we view this show, and it's something I've realized about myself, which is I get the feeling if we were reviewing this show 3 or even 4 years ago, my viewpoint on it would be different. Not to say better or worse in terms of its quality, but rather I'd have probably a much more visceral reaction to it. In the same way that if I had never reviewed Orange back when we did that, and they asked me to review it now, then I would have a different reaction to it, where I would feel a bit detached from it. And I'm not saying detached as in like, I can't be emotionally affected by it or anything, because I thought what happened to Chiyuki was terrible and it really it gripped me. But I think having gone into a much better place in my life now than I was previously, like it's kind of curious and fascinating to me to see how I critique shows like this that cover the topic of suicide. Because full disclosure here, I have dealt with suicidal ideation in the past. I have been to therapy. And it's going to be something I'll be talking about later when we talk about what happens to Chiyuki and what it means to like live a full life.
You're saying we've lost our capacity for empathy. Is that what you're saying?
Mine certainly goes out the window whenever we cover a bad show. I mean, for the people who made Tesla, no, go fuck yourselves. But anyway, that's beside the point.
I did like that part of the finale, the way that they kind of taught the audience about empathy and showed Chiyuki was this deeply empathetic person and how like this is an important and good thing to be. And the way that they did it was like in parallel with the choice that Genti offered Mayu. I thought that was neat. That was neat. I don't know, man. I like all the things that it says. I just wasn't particularly moved by the way it said them. And I think, maybe like the way we did the reviews didn't do the show any favors. Like, because the episodic storytelling, like, I had trouble keeping in my head, like, the way that all of these things were affecting Chiyuki and kind of her movement forward and Decim. Like, I was just focused on largely the souls that were coming to be judged. And I don't know. Maybe if we watched it all in a more condensed kind of session or pair of sessions, like I watched the whole show over the course of a week. We reviewed it. I don't know. Maybe I'd react to it differently. That sort of thing matters, I think.
Yeah. To go back to what I was saying, though, I think that to answer your comment about how many people have a lot of affection for this show, I can't speak for those people. And if you are indeed one such person, I will make this abundantly clear right now. Everything that I've said, like throughout the show's run, I don't mean to devalue people's like experience watching it, because I think that again, to suggest like if I was watching this say 3 years ago when I was in a different place in my life in a different mindset, then this actually probably would have raced even higher for me because I felt like it would have been a very valuable, it would have been like a message about like, the value of life and a life well lived and all that. So I think again that really speaks to how your appraisal of the show is something that can't be done entirely clinically. Like if we as critics, we have our biases, we have our perspectives, and I think that or even for people who are just watching this casually, like depending on where they are in their lives, they're going to have a very different reaction to it than the rest of us. And I'll tell you again, like I've said with other shows of this ilk, like with Orange, or other shows like say Wonder Egg, for example, for better or for worse, if this show has been a positive force on your life, where it's made you feel better if you've been in a very dark place, if it's helped you get through that in one way or another, even a little way, then as far as I'm concerned, that has unquantifiable value beyond it simply being a work of art.
Yeah, totally. Very well said, and 100% agree. I do think Wonder Egg is an interesting point of comparison for me, because I remember when we were watching that show, we cared so deeply about the principal cast that we said, you know what? They don't resolve the world building stuff and the metaphysical mechanics of what's going on. That's less important to me than some kind of resolution with the character drama. And I just think maybe that this show for me, I cared more about, like, I felt more interested in seeing those kinds of, details about the world resolve. Like, what was the goddamn point of the different departments and all that kind of thing? And, Nona's whole deal just felt very superfluous. Not to say that added nothing, particularly Nona, but like, I don't know. She like, if she just had the power of her on her own to like move memories around with a finger and summon them and look at them and do like, besides the aesthetic, like how would the show have been affected at all? I mean, I just don't think it would have. So,
yeah. Well,
yeah, it just was so, I don't know, like that whole thing as a system, the whole afterlife, they showed it, and they critiqued it. They critiqued the abstract idea of, judgment, of anybody making dispassionate judgment on humans. But like, then they just stopped. I felt like it just wasn't enough. So,
as I say, I think this ties into my point originally, which was a substantial amount more focus, the paring down of unnecessary and trite elements, to really condense this into its core message, its core appeal, to not have the distraction of the world building at all, to not have that be a part of it, would have made this a lot better, in my opinion.
Maybe they just didn't have enough in terms of ideas.
Well, that's the thing, though. That's it. We have to, of course, remember the origin point that this show came from, which was the pilot, or rather the one-off short, Death Billiards, which was a great proof of concept. But it goes to show sometimes, even when you can expand a proof of concept, it doesn't mean you can just start doing whatever the hell you want, like with Mayu and Harada, or all the other guff that they put in here that just felt completely perfunctory. And conversely, I should note, you talking about the world building there. If the show had wanted to go into great detail about the world building and not focused on Chiyuki to make her basically be the interloper who stays and it's not about her at all, that's an alternative path one can take for writing this show. Whether or not that would be the better path to take is ultimately speculation. We can only hypothesize. But we seem to be having two different through lines in this show, which don't really gel together at all. And one of them is certainly more developed than the other, and it's the better of the two, in my opinion, which is the Chiyuki stuff. But the world building stuff is just kind of there, but it leaves lingering question marks everywhere to the point where I'm like, well, just jettison it. You can literally strip some of these episodes down of various side content, like with Oculus and Nona, and then apart from the fact that they don't operate for a nice, clean 24 minutes, would lose nothing. perfunctory. But anyway,
largely, yeah.
Yeah.
He had a cool pool table. That's the long and the short of it.
He did. Right. Well, anyway, I suppose that's our thoughts out of the way. We should start getting into more depth. So we'll do creative first, then we'll move on to patron questions.
Okay. Well, so we're going to talk about a couple of episode directors this week, and we'll look at a Seiyu too. Why not? All right. So first, we're going to look at the well, actually, I said episode directors. We're going to look at one storyboarder, one episode director, and a Seiyu. So we'll look at the storyboarder for episode 9 of Death Parade, Hiroshi Kobayashi. And Kobayashi has done a fair bit of storyboarding, key animating, and episode direction. Looking at the CV, I feel like we have talked about this person before because they were involved with Kill la Kill, storyboarded 3 episodes, directed 2, did some key animating. Because this person directed Kisniver, and storyboarded 7 episodes of that. And that is a show. Did you ever watch Kisniver?
No.
Okay. So I haven't.
More like Kiss Never.
No. I haven't completed it because I kind of got disillusioned with it at the time. Although I realize I should probably go back and give it another shot, right? But this is I guess that might be one of the only holes in your Trigger viewing catalog.
It's a couple. Space Patrol Luluco still on my to-do list, as is Gurren Lagann for that matter.
Well, they were still at Gainax at that point. Even though it's so funny, we all are just like, this is a Trigger show because it feels Trigger, like it's Hiroyuki Imaishi, but it's technically still a Gainax show. But yeah, I wonder how people feel about Kisniver. I bet that the people that stuck around and enjoyed it are standing it still. So we've also got, there's a ton of interesting stuff that they've worked on. Oh no. C-Control the money and soul possibility.
Oh,
another mention.
We really need to have some sort of, I don't know, some sort of QI wrong answer alarm, when someone says the wrong answer and they just have the alarm blare and then Gurren Lagann appears and sorry, not Gurren Lagann, C Control, I can't even say it, you know what I mean.
Yes.
We need to have that happen because the amount of times we mention that now, it feels like it's one of the most mentioned things ever, and yet I have not one iota of interest to ever watch it.
Well, you could be forced to watch it one day in the near future.
Is that foreshadowing by any chance?
Perhaps.
Oh, you prick.
The foreshadowing of soul and possibility. He also directed Dragon Pilot, Hisone, and Masotan, which I think is on Netflix, is a Netflix anime. And storyboarded a little Psycho-Pass, a little Punchline, a little Noragami, a little Saga of Tanya the Evil, the movie and the TV show. Some Tiger and Bunny episode direction, storyboarding. So it worked on a lot of really interesting properties. Now we're going to talk about the director of episode number 10, Motohiro Abe. And Abe-san has a smaller CV. Looking for things I've heard about. Fate Grand Order, First Order Special, the unit director.
Oh, also, God. Oh, grief.
Your favorite. And also the unit director for Gamers. I have to say it really loud because it's an exclamation point.
Oh, God. I thought you were having to stay away from the screen. It's like when you sneeze and you've got to cover up your face. You know what's funny? I actually did watch the very first Fate Grand Order movie that came out way back when, and it was okay. But the thing is, I think it's, if you're a Fate fan, you'll love it, and if you're just kind of whatever on it, then whatever. But it was fine. the section that might as well be guest animated by Ray Harryhausen, where they fight skeletons, which I found funny. But yeah.
Couple of seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal 1 and 2 did a little production advancement for that. Not too much else. So, but this is the director of episode 10 of Death Parade. And so now let's talk about, would you rather talk about the Seiyu for Decim or the Seiyu for Chiyuki?
I feel like I recognize Decim's voice actor from somewhere. So,
okay.
And this is not to drag on Chiyuki's voice actress at all, but let's give Decim his due.
All right. So Decim is voiced by Tomoaki Maeno, Maeno.
Mm-hmm.
We got a role as I can't really pronounce that in Street Fighter Cross Tekken.
Hwoarang. Hwoarang, yes, Mr. Kickman. Yeah, he's a kicky boy, is Hwoarang. I remember him from Tekken 3 when he was introduced. Not to be confused with the other kick boy, which is of course Eddie Gordo, who is that's our second fighting reference because Eddie, of course, has capoeira as his fighting skill, which was the same as why can I not? I've heard names left my memory, and we only talked about it last week.
the alpaca. We were, I can't remember her name either.
She's all packering, a real mean fighting style. You know what I mean? Right. Anyway, moving on.
Kyo from King of Fighters, 14 and 15. Which is interesting. I guess they changed the voice actor for Kyo. I hadn't realized that. Still looking through the non-anime roles for interesting stuff. I don't know why this makes me laugh. I don't know why. It shouldn't make me laugh, but he dubbed over the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man in those Amazing Spider-Man movies.
I'm so sorry for him.
I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it really does.
What poor guy?
Oh goodness me.
Well, you gotta pay the bills somehow.
Zhongli in Genshin Impact, and Yuo in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But let's look at the anime stuff. Let's see.
Imagine being by the way, imagine being a Seiyu for a male character in Genshin Impact. Who in their audience is going to give a fuck about that? Christ alive. Anyway,
no comment.
Please do continue.
Oh, Schubert in Classicaloid. Do you remember I told you about Classicaloid where it's sort of like a shonen-y mecha version of like where all these famous composers are reincarnated as boys that live together in a big house. He's Schubert. And of course we know Death Parade and Death Billiards. He's in the Dragon's Dogma anime, sadly. Kinro and Dr. Stone. That seems like a good role. He is Sagamiya in Fire Force. I've not watched Fire Force. Have you dipped into the Fire Force?
No, because I found out very quickly it had some like sketchy fan service and it wasn't. It was more a shonen thing. And whatever you want to say about the fan service, I'm going to be honest here. Shonen stuff like MHA isn't my cup of tea. That's not a statement of quality or anything like that. It's just not my thing.
Sure.
Meh. I mean, gotcha. the OP to the second season is a banger. I think it's Inferno, whatever it is. That's a real ball buster of a song. I love it. But got nothing else to add to about that. I mean, there's fire and there's a force. I guess
that combats the fire.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a title that explains as a good anime title. Many anime titles are bad. That's a good anime title. Mm-hmm. So he is Makoto Shimada in Haikyuu, the lovely volleyball boys show. Satsuki Myodoin in Myodoin in Heartcatch Precure, which is an amazing magical girl show, my favorite magical girl show. He plays like a bit role in Kato the Right Answer, someone who's just in episode 8, which is funny to me.
Good. The less prominent, the better in that show.
Atsushi in Library War, that's cool. Oh man, M3 the Dark Metal. This person has a lot of roles. There's a ton of roles. Some Gundam, Iron Blooded Orphans. He's Kamich Isuragi. We have. I'm going to scroll through faster to see if there's anything of note. Lots of Star Mew, Shukoga, tons of Star Mew. See, there's a lot of Veldora in Reincarnated as a Slime 1, 2, and 3. Lots of Super Lovers, a show that I'm not sure I want to know about. And is Fukutomi in Yawapeda, Yawamushi Pedal, which is a cool long running bicycling anime. Oh, he's Michelle Crispino in Yuri on Ice.
Oh, so, I wonder if we're going to reference Yuri on Ice at any point during the discussion of this particular block episode.
We might.
I wonder if that might happen. Oh my god. How could we possibly link these things together? Since we're talking about Sei, by the way, I want to give another shout out to Keiji Fujiwara, who plays the detective, because of course we are. Well, I say we're covering episode 9, but I'm going to spend barely any time talking about it, to be quite honest, when we get to talking points. But I want to give Keiji Fujiwara a shout out because he's such a fucking goat of a voice actor. Taken from us too young. And when I say that, I don't mean to say like because of the work we never got from us more, because he's too young an age to die regardless. But he always puts a belting performance in whatever he does, and he's still great as a detective, even as he unravels and gets increasingly unhinged as episode 9 continues. But as I say, like, I am going to probably spend very little time talking about episode 9, so I just felt like I should at least get that shout out now.
See, to me, that 2-parter was like when I felt best about the series. I thought that was when it was the most, I don't know, it felt most interesting dealing with that shit. And then the final 3 episodes, yeah, it's not here to say they were bad. They just didn't grab me as much. So are we ready for the final Patreon patron questions of Deshou the Third? This section is going to become just Discord questions.
It is.
Discord and perhaps Twitter, but definitely Discord.
Indeed. And so, however, while our Patreon may be, preserved, but otherwise offline forever, it may have been, put away in storage, all of our material's still there. You might be thinking to yourself at home, hey, I like the cut of Shadon's jib, and I like the cut of Doc's jib as well. So how do I support them financially? How do I send them actual real-world money for which they can buy goods and services? And dear viewer, dear listener, do I have the answer for you? Pop it over to Ko-Fi, that is ko-fi, ko-fi, /Warui Deshou, and you can just drop us a tip there. That supports us financially, and it keeps me... Well, I don't drink actual coffee, but I do drink coffee-flavored beer, and that's close enough for it to count. So if you want to keep me in alcohol, then by all means pop on over there and give us a donation if you like our work and want to help us support us making more in the future.
Yeah, we would appreciate tips if you enjoy our stuff. We much appreciate it. If you were able, if you're not able, that is A-okay. Enjoy our stuff however you choose. I always thought it was pronounced coffee. I understand the Ko-Fi, but like since the mug of coffee is so, and they to like buy me a coffee,
I mean,
is it buy me a coffee on coffee or buy me a coffee on Ko-Fi? Is it, how do you?
I prefer Ko-Fi because it means that we can title like our promotional video as Warui Deshou Ko-Fi Beats to donate to subscribe to.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'm into it. I've changed my stance. You've converted me to the GIF position when I was a GIF.
The GIF position. I will never attempt to convert Swans to the GIF position. What do you take? What do you take me for?
Ko-Fi is the GIF of pronunciations of KO-FI.
Oh my god. Well, it's got a dash in front of it, so that's my reason for doing it, as opposed to the GIF and GIFing, which is just basically the pronunciation that proletarians use.
Flies in the face of all grammar rules. I appreciate your argument. That's a reasoned and thought out argument.
You don't get many of those from me on this podcast, so treasure it. anyway, right, to the Patreon questions, because of course we still have our wonderful Deshou legends, people who subscribe to us on Patreon, who are still in our Discord, who have chipped in some things to ask us. We have two pretty fun questions, firstly from Rackham, and the first one goes something like this. Lots of people, including those who love the song, have said the OP for Death Parade doesn't fit the overall tone of the show. Yep. That's a hard yeah on that one. If you were to pick an existing song to replace it, what do you feel would be your top choice and why? Okay.
Oh, man. Ooh, this is really good.
I actually have two answers to this. And this is where I get to cheat a little bit because I'm the person who edits this particular podcast. So, of course, I already picked intro and outro music for it that I felt was relatively appropriate to the material. So, my first answer, and it's partly just to piss off the actual lead artist behind it, is to, of course, have the Smiths' Cemetery Gates.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck you, Morrissey. Just throwing that one in
there.
Okay. And the alternative, just because the lyrics kind of semi-resemble what might be going on here, but also because it's a meme in its own right, and it's just amusing to me, it would be, of course, Maria Takeuchi's Plastic Love.
Okay. That's a good song to put anywhere, anytime. So, of course, it fits this situation. I'm going to go with the Dawson's Creek theme. I think just because of the I don't want to wait for our lives to be over. That part.
Oh my god. But that reminds me when we were discussing Gundam War in the Pocket, and I suggested it should have had something like the Full House theme for the opening.
So wrong. Still the wrongest thing. Oh man.
That's
or maybe Life's a Bitch by Nas. Like, life's a bitch and then you die. That's why we get high. Or no, that's why we puff fly. Because you never know when you're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
That would be darkly funny.
I mean, if you want another from me, I would also suggest a orchestral violin version of Every Day is Night by Garode, which, of course, is one of these songs from Valhalla, set in a bar. There you go.
Oh, right.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, that's the bartender song, the goofy one that we put at the beginning of that podcast would also work. That one always makes me giggle a lot. But yeah, those are my picks. Nos, Life's a Bitch, and the Dawson's Creek theme.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. If you were to pick an existing character from anime or video games to be an arbiter, who do you believe would be the best choice for the job, and also who would be the worst choice? And what would the theme of their bars be? Oh boy. This is a tough one. This is a tough one. Doc, you got any suggestions for best or worst? Well, I know who my worst would be.
So let me back up. I feel like Rackham actually wanted a serious answer out of me, not a comedic one. So the most appropriate music I guess I can think of, like, that springs to mind is when the cast reaches the end of time in Chrono Trigger. Maybe you could do some kind of like a remixed, like, modern, chopped and screwed beat or whatever of that song, and maybe throw some hip hop lyrics in there. Maybe just make it instrumental. Make that the opening. That will be a lot more somber. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's something. I think while the opening is like tonally dissonant, I mean, I think that it's clear that they wanted it to be that way. They wanted to. There just wasn't a mistake, right? They were like, what sort of mission do we want to accomplish by like setting this kind of tone? I guess they just didn't want to be too morose with everything, and they wanted you to feel like, okay, while we're about to cover some dark subject matter, we're about to do it with this cast of goobers that you've come to know and love, and like they have their roles in this. So this is like this OP is almost like Omake that we talked about, but I I can't remember if you and I have talked about this before or not, or this was on another podcast, but like these like extras that they would release on a lot of times back in the day, they would come out on CDs, Shadon. I don't know if you remember the compact disc format, but it'd be the anime characters having conversation off camera. You know what I mean? And in the visual novel, The House in Fata Morgana, after you play it, unlocks a mode like that where like outside the canon of the story, it's like the characters chat with you and stuff like that and give you a behind the scenes tour as if like the story of the game was like a role they're playing in a play or a movie or something like that. And it's almost like this is that sort of thing happening right here with Death Parade, where like, yes, like the story is like the canon of the story is very dark and everything like that. But these characters for this moment exist outside of it. And we want you to get attached to them and buy their merch and have a good time and get stickers and Blu-rays and posters and everything and enjoy them. Draw them, you know, sell doujinshi at Comiket. So
entirely fair.
And I think that that's fine. I mean, I actually find that like different kind of, I guess modality is the right word. That like is a really interesting storytelling technique. IMO. But
I mean, one could also make the point that we've seen other shows where they have different OPs depending on the material in the episodes. I mean, I again cite the Persona 4 anime as an example of this because, you know, when shit got serious in that story, did they have the happy OP play before that? No, they had basically what was a title card and they went straight into it so as not to sour the mood of the actual material at hand. And so my argument would therefore be if you had the budget for it, maybe have the goofy OP over the goofier episodes, like the Mayu ones, for example. Works perfectly for those, for the most part, and then have something a bit more serious for the other ones.
Don's answer, throw money on trees. Pay to license mini songs. Pay people to animate mini OPs.
Ideal world and all that.
But I mean, I'm just busting your balls. Yeah, that would be ideal.
I know.
That would be ideal.
All right. So we'll go back to
in an ideal world, every show would use the opening song from the first Attack on Titan OP. That would just be the OP for anime. Full stop. You use that song and you animate whatever you want to over it, but you just have to use that song forever in all OPs. That'd be the ideal way to do it.
I think that would actually just pass out be funny if it was in front of certain shows.
It really would. Or like very serious, like, you know, shows. It would be extremely funny.
Just have that as the opening to like one of the episodes of the first season of Fruits Basket or something.
Incredible. Or goofy shows. Yeah, I'm telling you. See, you're coming around. This is a good idea.
I mean, Toru's like the subject of the episode is Toru like going on a knitting course or something like that, and Kyu and
just so epic.
You get my point. Yes. Anyway, right. Let's continue on then. So Rackham's second question was if you were to pick an existing character from anime or video games to be an arbiter, who do you believe would be the best choice for the job? And also, who would the worst choice be? Okay, so and what would the theme their bars be?
Are we going with the criteria of, you know, the 4 rules? It's really 3 rules that become 4 that Oculus and Nona set out. Is that the bar? And we decide who'd be good at that and who'd be bad at that? Or do we set our own criteria?
I honestly have forgotten what the rules are because I just didn't care at that point.
Okay, I can tell you. An arbiter must judge. Can't quit judging because they're an arbiter. An arbiter cannot have emotions because they get too close to humans.
I'm thinking of who this is. Go on, carry on.
And then an arbiter can't die And then the last one, because they're a dummy, hurt. And the last one that gets added on at the very end is an arbiter can't work with life, because then like they can't collaboratively work with a human to do stuff, because then they'll be ruined.
Right. Well, in that case, I have my best arbiter right off the bat that fits all four of those criteria to a T. And I say best, even though they are, in my opinion, a terrible person and a terrible character. I am, of course, referring to Hero Yui from Gundam Wing. Just think about that for a moment. think
what
about
does he
all
say
the criteria.
Is the way he knows how to live? I can't remember.
I don't either.
Like, live through your emotions or whatever. I act on the only way to live a good life is to act on your emotions. Yeah, that's right. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That fucking
I mean, he won't die because he's a dummy. Yeah, you don't need to tell me twice on that.
He refuses to die. He tries, but he refuses. He just
he can't collaborate with human beings. It all fits, I tell you. He is the perfect arbiter because he literally will judge a person immediately and say like, next time I'll see you, I'll kill you. So yeah, right. I think he would be. Right. I think he would be the perfect arbiter in my opinion.
You think he'd be good? Okay.
Yeah, and as for what his bar would look like, I think he would. I think his bar would literally just be like the inside of a Soviet gulag. It would just be the blandest thing ever. Like the inside of a canteen for there, like where it's just drab concrete walls, dripping water, that sort of thing. Who would my worst choice be? Oh, cock. Well, I feel like the easy answer here is Sailor Moon because she'd just let everyone go to heaven.
Okay. Yeah. You're all reincarnated. Yes.
And she's also not old enough to run a bar either, so I suppose that counts. But again, neither is Hero Yui. But then again, he's piloting a fucking Gundam, so I don't think like legal age requirement. Okay. Legal age requires count in Gundam Wing versus in Sailor Moon. So that's my answer, I guess. Yeah, Hero Yui's the best arbiter, quote unquote, and Sailor Moon would be the worst. There we go. Or Toru from Fruits Basket, as we mentioned before.
Well, I'll stick with the Gundam Wing.
Oh no!
And say the worst arbiter would be Chang Wufei, because he'd send all women to the void.
Oh,
just on, and that you can't run the system that way. That is you can't run a system that way. I mean, that's like too in plain sight the unfairness.
Oh God.
The mainstream media would pick up the story, and you have to have plausible deniability, so it would just not work.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, all I'd ever want to happen to Wufei, and if he ever was in his own Death Parade spin-off, would just be to have what's the name of the red orange haired arbiter dude again, whose name I keep forgetting, the board one, Ginty. Ginty, sorry, yeah. I just want him to leave Wu-Fei's head stuck between the elevator doors and they're constantly closing on him. Because it's all he deserves, let's be fair here.
Yes. He's the new doorstop. His face. That's good. Who could the best be? Well, immediately some Pen from Evangelion popped in my head.
Oh.
And, if you don't know Pen is the penguin who lives in Misato's fridge.
Of course.
Yeah, he occasionally walks out, and he's along with Misato. He got to live through the Shinji has a small penis gag, the iconic one, where he walks out of the shower, and Misato is there, and she has a big can of beer covering up his genitals, and then she moves it from the shot, and the tiny can of toothpicks is there still blocking his genitals to, you know why. I don't have to explain the joke further.
Thank God.
It's very funny. But yeah, Pen is unfazed by things like that. He can see, he's seen some shit, and he is unflappable. And he just goes, he's got his little towel, he drinks his beer, he goes and lives in the fridge. He's a cool customer. He could be detached. he's not a human, so he's not entangled in all this human emotion, all this like existential, angst and drama. He's, he can make the decisions that need to be made with a cool head, totally rational. Give it to Pin. I thought of Kepi also, but I couldn't decide if he'd be the worst or the best.
Right. I think that depends on what day it is, really.
Yes, exactly.
That's dangerous. That's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have one final question.
Wolfwood might be an actual good one.
Oh yes, you're
Nick
right.
D. Wolfwood. He's familiar with the whole judgment concept. He's also seen some shit, so I feel like he would have a grasp on the human condition.
He's already dead, so he's ready to be hired.
Yes, exactly. Spoilers.
Spoilers for something that's over 25 years old, I guess. In fact, it's approaching its 30th anniversary at this rate.
Light from Death Note says Go-Go Tom. Yes, he's already kind of doing that. Yeah, on this side of the life and death line, he's assumed that role. So, also John C. Rackham expresses the sentiment that of surprise that you have not seen Gurren Lagann, and feels like that it's something you ought to do, and I agree. He also says that the sea control is not that bad, and the me of 10 years ago vehemently disagrees with you. I haven't seen that show since it came out, so maybe we'll have to revisit it and find out. Maybe we'll just have to do that.
Great. I'm surprised you didn't start shoulder nudging the camera there. Oh dear. I mean, it'll end up turning out to be a C-tier anime at this rate. Oh, the easiest joke.
GameStop,
right.
I choose you.
Right. Final question. This one is from Gogo Atomic Robot. And the question is, after all we have seen, are the death games a fair way to judge the moral character of a person? Well, this is where I might have a mildly controversial opinion, but the problem is that the problem is it's difficult, I think, to answer this question because we don't ultimately know what their purpose is in the end. And you might say, well, they're meant to judge people to go for either heaven or hell, the void or reincarnation, whatever you want to call it. But is that what they're really there for? And this is the lingering problem, the lingering musk of including Oculus in the way that they have done, where he seems a bit suspect, and there's clearly some problems with the way this is all set up and all that. I'm like, okay, so is it working as intended? Is it as stated? Is it above board, for lack of a better phrase? Fucks if I know. That's shit on the cutting room floor right there. But, however, there's something I want to know. In episode 9, and I know I said I wasn't going to talk about much, but this is actually the perfect point for me to bring it up. Chiyuki talks, basically starts yelling at Desim, this is wrong, you can't be using these games to push people into these extreme situations. You're basically manufacturing the thing you're looking for. It's it's like putting the effects before the cause, if you know what I mean, that kind of thing. However, I have to make a mild disagreement over here, and here's the reason why, and this is where I get a little controversial, because I actually think one could argue that they could be, depending on how you look at it. If we just take them in a vacuum and are not concerned with the overall reason why they're being done. And here's the reason why. Now, this is going to sound like a strange tangent, but when I think of intelligence as a concept, nebulous though it is, I think of it in two ways. I think of what the intelligence one person can achieve, and the intelligence or has achieved, and rather than the intelligence that they have the potential to reach. So you have some people who are working as hard as they can, but have a theoretical limit, and then you have some people who aren't working as hard as they could be and have a limit they have not yet reached, which I don't think seems all that controversial. But anyway, I'm bringing it up as an analogy because I think you could also use that to express how people behave in extreme situations. What is the absolute like point of no return, like the stopping point for when how people will hurt each other or harm each other or do wrong, you know, versus like what they have done in the past.
Right.
And so what we see with the kid, whose name I forget in episode 9, is that okay, yeah, he did kill a person, but Death Parade seems to have this curious like mishmash idea on vigilante justice. It's nowhere near as well handled as Odd Taxi tackles it, in my opinion. But the point being, though, is that I mean, he was put in an extreme situation and then, killed this person because he was, wanting to seek revenge for his sister, which is a different thing than what happens at the end of the episode, where he just inflicts unimaginable pain on the detective by shattering the air hockey pucks
I can't believe
that represent
that.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the question one would then have to ask is that like, him going to the limit of what he is capable of doing, or even like further beyond where he's been before, in terms of the evil he is capable of committing to another person? Because if that's the case, I think like, if people like do have, that capacity, but it isn't tested to see how far they can go when pushed, then I think that maybe that is a way of judging the moral character of a person, that, when the chips are down, literally depending on the game that you're playing in the the Death Parade bar, how far will you go? Is there a certain point in which you will say, no matter the circumstances, I can't hurt another human being just for its own sake or just for my personal well-being? Like, there is a certain point in which I stop. I mean, on the flip side of that, we see what happens with Chiyuki later when she is given the option to literally kill another person to bring herself back to life, and she can't do it. Which is a similar thing where she has her limit. Whereas that kid, if he has a limit, it wasn't even it was either reached at the end of episode 9, or there's even darker depths to him that we don't see. So I would argue that depending on how you look at it, you could say that they are a way of judging the moral character of a person, because by putting people in extreme situations, you see if they do have like the iron will or the principles to not do the horrible things they do. I mean, we talked about this before in the earlier episodes, like when they were playing the darts game, for example, and I said, well, you know what they could do if they were truly cooperating and not yelling at each other? Just throw the darts at the floor.
Right, yeah.
So what? Like, they don't have to play the game.
Sure.
Or they don't have to play the game by those rules. So that's one way you could look at it. But with all the ancillary shit around there, it's clearly being done as a way of, well, I don't know, trying to expedite it. But I don't think like that they're necessarily. I mean, if we say fair in the sense of like, do they actually measure what they're saying out to measure? I think so, but I would also not call them ethical in any way, shape, or form. That's something I should be clear on as well.
Well, this is the afterlife. Ethics are out the window. Ethics are between living human beings.
Oh my.
I mean, I guess this just depends on whether you kind of believe what Detective Tatsumi believes. Well, or I guess Chiyuki says this actually, not Tatsumi, that if you put any human being in extreme enough circumstances, then they will crack, right? That they're gonna go over the line and commit violence or some kind of wrongdoing, but they feel cornered, that no one, I guess the implicit thing in that is that no one would do that if they didn't feel cornered in that way. And I mean, we know that's not true, that there are some people that do. And I guess like we could set those people to the side and be like, those people, for the purposes of this exercise, are bad, and we can just say they're bad. But what about everyone else who is, cornered into it? And I mean, do you think that that's true? I mean, do you think like that there, that nobody has the capacity to, that everyone will yield to temptation at some point?
I think it depends on the pressure that you're forced under. I mean, I think of the kid, for example, like, when he's just basically being taunted by the detective, like, that was definitely him being shown to be, like, not as noble as he otherwise would appear. Because there is, as you rightly know it, there's no way he should have done what he did. The detective was
but they
just
were
mocking him.
so. But I mean, you're right. But like his circumstances were just so. I mean, like unlike anything that you would almost ever encounter in real life. You know what I mean? Like he was like this experiment designed to push him over the line, and it really pushed his button. It's almost like it's penalizing you for, having people that you feel so strongly about that if something were done to them or they were taken away from you, you would cross moral lines. And what you were saying before this is you think that there are some people that have the moral fiber to always resist. And I think that I would agree. I think I have to agree in some ways. But like that, just that, our lives are about shaping our moral character, and that some of us can become better or worse. Some of us don't have a chance, but some of us can become better or worse when we face those circumstances. Because the alternative to me seems so like just wild and nihilistic almost, that like, well, the only reason anyone is good is because they're never pushed. And if everyone is pushed, they will always do harm. They'll always steal, kill, and destroy. And the only reason that you're not doing it is because you're a babe who's been protected. And that feels yucky to me right now. So I'm going to reject that notion. And I'm going to say that there are people who could resist. But I think even having said that, I think Chiyuki has a good point about these death games. Like, I don't know if the idea of like judgment is really understanding someone to pass a judgment. I think that this is a bad way to do it, because you're just understanding where their kind of line is, like what is their capacity for to commit like bad things. You're not like understanding, because like I think you could have a person who, when some particular thing was threatened, would do something really horrible to another human, right? But what if that person in life was incredibly generous and charitable and did lots of great things and like was a good person and everything, but just like had this very specific scenario where if you fucked with them a certain way, they would lose it. Like, that's really hard. I mean, I don't know. This is why I didn't study ethics or become an ethicist.
Oh gosh. I mean, I do 100% agree with you. Like, when I'm referring to them being good tests of moral character, I must stress I'm referring it into a vacuum, because the overall lesson of Death Parade is that there is nuance and complexity and beauty to life. That is something that you need to really, quite literally, have your eyes open for, to notice all around you. That's a big part of the finale, and also what happens with Decim as well, when he he literally has his eyes open. He finally does something that should have been done ages ago. Just move that mop of hair out of his face.
Yeah, exactly. But I think,
oh, you're a you fool.
I think the show is saying that it's bad. I mean, I think the show is saying that the games are not good, and that there's a better way to understand each other. If that's and so the system as constructed now is not really designed to achieve understanding. Right? It's just to test a very particular response. But I guess the show is like saying that understanding that particular fact about a person is not a way to understand them as a human being. And that's what we should be trying to do rather than like, judging them by this very horrible act.
Yep.
So, and I think I agree with that. And so I'm going to say that the game is not good and there's a better way.
I mean, yeah.
Basically, you just have to live their entire life.
Yeah. I agree with you when you say the game is bad, but I mean, well, we could talk about Fortnite another day. We best move on.
Okay.
Sorry,
right, sure.
Couldn't resist. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Death Parade's overall message, as I say, is about, I mean, there's literally a quantity versus quality point that's made in the final episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I will get to that soon enough. But anyway, I think if we've got nothing else to add, that brings us to the end of the patron questions for Deshou the Third Forever. So, as we said on our second stream finale for Odd Taxi, to everyone who's given us both suggestions what to cover on Deshou the Third and also questions for us to answer during Deshou the Third, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your contributions and making these podcasts better by your prompts, by the shows that you've given us to watch, to consider. Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, of course, to Rackham and Gogo Type Robot for providing the set questions we had today. But now is the time that we get into talking points, and well, I have a few. I have a few, but I'm going to let you have yours first, Doc, if you would be up for it.
Let's see. What do I want to say that we haven't touched on already? I don't know. Why don't you actually go first, and then I will respond off of what you say and make my own points? Because, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a ton of other notes beyond a lot of the things that we've already said.
Okay. So I'm going to start with a smaller point, and I want to talk about Chavot or Chavo, the fairy tale book.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a small thing, but I think generally speaking, when it comes to the use of fairy tales in fiction, be they real fairy tales like, your Jack and the Beanstalk and all that, or even Aesop fables, things like that, or ones that are created entirely for the work itself, they're brand new creations, but are told as fairy tales or fables within the fiction of the world. And this is the point where I also, by the way, I don't know if Chavot is actually a real fairy tale or not. It's not actually relevant to the point I'm about to make, to be fair, though. But I'm just going to clarify that now. I mean, to me, like the lead character's name is Chavo, and I just keep thinking that that's like some sort of like Burberry wearing scumbag character from like the northeast of England. Is it like a fairy tale about a kid like gets an ASBO or something like that and learns the value of like treating other people normally? That's what it sounds like to me on that. But anyway, that's my English side coming out here.
Isn't that a slang, like a bad word for someone? A chav?
Oh,
is that what you're referring to?
Just look that up someday, and believe me, you'll see that
it's what people call Chelsea fans sometimes.
Well, I can't comment, but I will say that chavs have existed for most of my adult life, and you will never find a more dreary-looking, personality-free bunch of wankers in general than any other, really. But that's beside the point.
According to tandem.net, this is derogatory British slang for a young hooligan who normally starts fights and makes trouble. They're usually seen as lower class. Well, that's rude. You could be a rabble-rousing hooligan and have money.
Mm-hmm.
Urban Dictionary says, stupid, annoying arses need to get a life, think they're superior to the human race, shag everything that moves, hand always in their pants, must get pregnant. I'm going to stop reading. This is
that's
clearly
something you look
written by a biased person.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, back to Death Parade and Chavot. So the Chavot is revealed, of course, to be or we've seen before, is the fairy tale story of the kid who sees this girl outside and goes to see her, escape with her, but then falls down and is rescued, etc., etc. Now, I think I tend to find a little cliche and trite about fairy tales used in fiction, in the text of fiction that is inside the diegesis of a work, is they tend to, in my opinion, be too often a one-to-one overlay between characters in the fairy tale and characters in the actual story. And I think, oh, yeah, no, it's too obvious. It's a bit, there's something a bit clunky about it. But I actually really like Chavot's implementation here for two reasons. The first of which is that it has actually a much simpler impact on Chiyuki rather than being. I mean, it does have a close relation to events in the show, which I'll get to in a bit. But it actually has a much simpler impact on her, in that it serves as the inspiration for her to start ice skating, which I thought was a really neat detail. Like, Chavo actually goes ice skating in the book, and then she starts doing it as well. I'm like, that's neat. That makes sense. It feels like something that would happen with a kid who reads a story they're really into. Like, I want to do that thing, and lo and behold, she does. She becomes a professional ice skater. So nice little bit there where it feels much more grounded and much more real. But then also, one of the things about the boy in the story is that he is deaf. And he is from the inside of a window looking out to someone he really wants to be with and spend time with, but then falls into this hole. Does that not sound entirely dissimilar to what happens to Chiyuki when she sees the simulacra of her mother in episode 12? Where she is yelling at Mom, Mom, and then ultimately can't. And I'm like, that's where the parallel between it comes in. But it comes in such a way where it's just at the last minute and isn't entirely one-to-one, where I'm like, this works. I like this. It doesn't feel like a clunky implementation of a fairy tale to make a really cheap point. Like, it feels like they actually put a little bit of thought into it. So kudos to that. That's my little thesis on how you use fairy tales in stories, in that you don't go for the obvious. You try and mix it up a little bit or make it less clunky. Doc is dying here.
I have two things to say.
Are these about Asbos?
No. They're not. I do apologize if my ignorance in learning on the pod what that meant exactly offended anyone. It turns out that it's an offensive term. My second, while you were talking, I just thought about this. Do you remember when 02 ate that fairy tale book? It's like, what if Chiyuki just ate the Chabo?
I mean, I suppose I could. I mean, thinking back to Franks, I suppose you are what you eat.
That really happened. That is not. I'm not making that up. She had a fairy tale story that she loved as much as Chiyuki loved Chavo, and then she ate it.
Mm-hmm. And then we didn't get to see the off-screen aftermath of that, where she had horrific indigestion. That's what you get when you want to make a character quirky for no adequately explained reason. Yeah. But that's a discussion for a different podcast that we've already done previously, and we're never doing again.
See our circa 2018 work.
I mean, it was really, really long, and I'll sum up for you briefly. The ICF was WCF anyway. Right. So that's my point on Chava anyway. Do you have anything to add, Doc, or do you want me to continue with my talking points?
No, I mean, this was part of my viewing issue, is that I thought there was a lot on Chavo at the beginning and at the end, and kind of fitting the pieces together in my brain wasn't, I don't know, super clean, but in real time it wasn't. But your explanation makes a lot of sense. I think I appreciate it more now, having heard that. But no, continue forward.
I will actually have one other thing, which is I still don't get how Chavot appeared to be the layout for that panel of the game. That was a bit of a clunky coincidence, but whatever. It doesn't really matter. Right. So back to the point at hand. Let's talk. Do I want to? You know what? I'm going to give my spicy thought now. I'm going to get my spicy thought out of the way
I'm ready
because
for the
I don't want to end the discussion of. I don't want the discussion of Death Parade on the like negative element, or when I say negative, as in the show was being negative about this. Not that I didn't like it necessarily, even if it is quite dark. I want to end it on the high note where I talk about episode 11 and how amazing it is. But let's talk about what happens to Mayu and Harada.
Okay.
So context. Mayu is still loitering around in Ginty Jinty's bar. Why? Not a fucking clue. Couldn't tell you. Never explained. And in my opinion, actually makes Chiyuki's own like presence like feel less special, which I think is a bad thing for the show.
I mean, that's interesting, right? Because there are some stuff here where I could see if you were feeling particularly pedantic watching the show, that you'd be super frustrated because you'd be like, outline the freaking rules here for regular humans staying in this world at the bars. Like, it's very ill-defined, and it didn't upset me, especially at the end when I was like, oh, they're doing these parallels or whatever. But I could see being annoyed at it, and especially if you're like Shadon and didn't like the characters.
It's true. Yeah, I was just like, she's still there without any real explanation, which I thought, well, that dilutes Chiyuki's presence here, but whatever. That's not my actual spicy point here. I need to give more context. So, inexplicably, I don't also know why that happens either. Harada's dummy, lifeless, soulless dummy, is still in the bar. Why?
I don't know if it's still there or it reappeared. I'm unclear on that.
No clue. We're not given any real explanation that I can recall.
Because so if I recall, like, she's like, why is he here? Which, like, if he never left, it didn't seem like she would ask that question. But who knows? Who can say?
Yeah, and I mean, by the mechanics of the show, like, the dummies only have the appearances they do when the souls are in them, but his soul is not in him right now. So why does he look like that? Like, none of this makes any fucking sense. It's really, really poorly explained and set up. Because arguably the moment they were done at the end of episode 7 or 6 or whatever it was, like, he was getting sent to the void. Off you go. End of that. But none of that, again, is my spicy take. That's just me pointing out, like, the context and also the inconsistencies of it. So what happens is that Jinty basically says, like, if you take the dummy in the elevator to, hell, take it down to the void, you can find his soul, but you will lose yours in turn, and you will join with him at the moment of oblivion, basically. There's no coming back from that. You will not survive it. You'll be stuck in basically eternal, like, agony, the deepest, most negative parts of your emotions, and so on and so forth. And Mayu basically says something to the effect of, Harada is my life, or something like that. And in the end, she goes through with it. And we get the scene where Harada's soul, very briefly, in the most thinnest of shots, reappears inside his body. And then when the dummies, like, lose the souls and they are obliterated into the void, with what I suppose is meant to be a really sentimental one, the two of them, little motes of light joining together, and I'm like, whatever. They are holding hands. The dummies are holding hands at the end. And I want to criticize. I'm going to get my criticism out of the way before I get to my spicy take. I really hate how it's her doing all the emotional heavy lifting here, and he has no involvement in it whatsoever.
It does really, I was thinking about that. It really did seem like this is what she wanted, and we don't really know if it's what he wants.
Well, I can tell you it isn't what he would have wanted, because what was his sentiment at the end of episode 6? I don't want another girl to give her life for me. That was what he was saying when she was hanging off the edge of that twister pillar.
Well, and technically she was already dead. So she wasn't giving up her life. She was giving up her eternal destiny. That's different from your living, breathing,
Oh,
semantics,
wow.
Are you really alive in the afterlife?
Well, she definitely ain't coming back anymore, that's for sure.
No.
That soul's been ground up into so much dust and turned into stuff that people
became two corns that fused into a single corn. They are corn together forever. falling.
What a truly terrible fate.
And then
so yeah,
she becomes like a wooden statue. Well, I don't know if she is the wooden statue, but he makes a statue of her. Those little.
Oh like, yeah, he carves one of those little like Matryoshka looking dolls.
Yeah,
and the implication is like there's a couple more of those.
She really got me, man. Those things she said in the elevator, they really got to me.
So the implication is that Jinty has like had people hang around before with him, which I don't care. I don't know any of these people. I don't even really know him as a character. Like, he's so disillusioned with everything. I know you might want to say that maybe, as you rightly point out, she had an impact on him, but
maybe
I don't know. It just felt so thin. But again, no, this is the spicy take. I've got my criticism out of the way about the fact that Harada has no involvement in any of this, which sucks, and I hate it. He doesn't get to like give a shit about her until the very last second, which, well, whatever. Token gesture though it may be. But
at the end of the episode that they were in, he seemed like, you're cool. You don't have any makeup on. Like, you're my type. We're now officially, we're good. I like you.
You don't look like a tart anymore. Great. Nice one, Harada. Real good there. I mean, my criticisms from episode 6 are still stand. But anyway, my spicy take is that Death Parade, by virtue of what happens to Bayou, is telling the audience that people who live their lives devoted to another person like she does are not worthy of spiritual absolution and salvation. That a life well lived is a life lived in, in service to oneself, like in the sense of like, that you don't fully devote it to someone else. Because all it ends up with is her following him into hell when she did nothing wrong in her actual real life. Like, she had no real crimes to speak of. She only even died because she slips in the shower. So I find that really interesting to think about, and I don't think that was the intention, because I think the intention of the scene with her was like, oh, don't you feel sad, like, that these two finally found each other after all this time? And like, well, one, we had this done better in episode 3 with the plastic surgery girl,
right?
So that was done better there. No, I hated the idea of like her being like having gone through what she did to stalk him, but I didn't mind the idea of like one last hurrah, like one final moment before they pass on into the afterlife as reincarnated, which will tie into my point about episode 11, funnily enough, because it's similar sort of thing. I don't think, as I say, the intention of that message was like part of the show, but I can't help but think, like, what is my takeaway from this when she's ultimately, her soul is obliterated into dust for a person who, as the show shows us in that episode, had no like involvement in her like life whatsoever. Like, it was as parasocial as it ever was, believe it or not. And in the end, like, it just led her to a bad end. And I thought, well, what's the takeaway from that? Like, it's got to be that people who live their lives obsessing with someone else in that kind of way are only due for a bad end. Granted, that also doesn't kind of mesh with what happens in episode 3, of course, because we had that exact same thing, and that all works out just fine. But yeah, like, I just couldn't help but think, wow, that's kind of dark when you think about it.
So I did not read this that way at all.
Well, that's a surprise. Not because I have anything about you, of course, but I just thought that, of course, what he's gonna say.
So, like, I think what she says to Ginty in the elevator, matters a lot. Like, she's choosing this. This is not something that's being forced upon her. Ginty is telling her, which, by the way, I thought Harada got reincarnated. Am I missing the boat on that? I thought at the end of his episode or the next episode, he went in the reincarnation elevator.
I don't recall seeing
that. I don't want to check it out because I don't want to use up any CPU power on this machine to look at it, but
brain power.
Right, well,
no need for that.
I am curious. I am curious about it, but like, whatever the case, right? Like, he's here, and Ginty's like, well, his soul is going to be, I don't want to use the term hell, right, and say damned, because that's not, like they say, that's not exactly right, but like, he's going to be cast into the void, all alone, around like negative energy forever. And instead of being reincarnated or instead of like continuing to hang out there, she chooses to, go be with him and be united with him in the void. That's the thing that she would prefer most of all. And I mean, who are we to say whether that's good or bad? And she says, Genti's like, psh, like, this seems dumb. And she's like, well, the fact that I chose it is what makes it meaningful. You don't even like have anything to say about why you do what you do. You didn't choose it. There doesn't seem to be a reason. And, I think she says a really interesting line like that. I can't determine on my own whether or not my life has meaning, but I do know that like making this choice feels meaningful. And so there you go. Like I'm doing something meaningful and defining my own life, and that's a good thing. And so it may not be what we would have chosen, but like it's her eternal soul, and she got to do this thing, and it was self-sacrificial too, which I mean is like, if you're really devoted to someone, and we can have a different discussion analyzing the health and nature of their relationship or whatever, but she would like sacrifice whatever other kind of fate she could have had so that he didn't have to be alone in the void. And I think that that's laudable and good. And she might not have even fully understood what she was doing, but like, like Warui says, the only way to live a good life is to act on your emotions. And she did.
Yeah, I can't believe you're ending your impassioned, alternative take there by quoting famous anime philosopher Warui.
Right, I am, yes.
Jesus,
the great
Christ.
ethicist of our time.
I mean, I would agree with you were it not for the fact that what happens with the void is, my understanding was the soul is dissipated and crushed into dust. It ceases to be at that point. And also,
I think they say you fall forever. You have a sensation of falling forever, surrounded by negativity, your own negative feelings. But perhaps if two souls are joined together, then there's relief from your own negativity. Because what if the negative energies and feelings are the result of you being alone, disconnected, and isolated? This is all a bunch of what ifs. But the show invites that because the show gives no concrete answers on so much of this stuff. So I don't feel bad for speculating.
Unfortunately, yeah, you're right. It does not offer concrete answers when they otherwise should be there. But I mean, I admit as well, you are entirely right in what you said before, that part of this is as much my own disinterest in those two characters, my dislike for them. I admit my bias here. But I just can't help but think in a similar way as I thought with like the outcome and Odd Taxi with Mai. You remember his, thing with like Rui and like how he was still going to like go see her in prison afterwards. I thought, is there any way like we could categorize this as a good thing? And what?
This is an interesting discussion.
And you know what? I would also like to make the point that I think that my feelings on this would have been completely U-turned if Harada had actually fucking been involved in this in any way. It's so one-sided that there's something really, really almost toxic about it.
This is a really good argument. I totally agree with you. I mean, this part of it, this other side of it is really difficult to reconcile, because it really does seem like I said, like she totally gets what she wants, but like,
does he want that? Does he want to spend this time with her?
I have no idea if like, I mean, I'm sure when the rubber meets the road, you prefer it to being alone in the void. But I don't know. It seems weird, like you said, that he has no kind of agency in this.
I can't help but wonder if this is that vein of misogyny I was talking about previously, where there's some curious ways in which the show treats a lot of its women. Except Chiyuki, thankfully. She like her story is pretty much bang on what it needs to be. But yeah, I don't know that. I mean, like I said, it is about as parasocial as it was previously, which is very strange to me. And by virtue also of it not explaining the rules in any concrete way, there's nothing there for, in my view, for Harada not to have popped back into his body for round 2. You know, we have another death game of some sort. I don't know. Like, the reason he's not there, I don't understand, like, from a writing perspective, unless it is simply to make judgment on Mayu's actions solely. And this is the point where I get to play the, well, actually, I'm not just talking about how badly women are treated, because, shouldn't Harada have a say in this as well?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where's his opinion in this? That should be a meaningful part of this discussion.
Yeah.
But I mean, the whole Mayu thing, like from start to finish, to me feels like that vestigial element of the show that just, like, okay, we got 12 episodes and we've got to fill out time, so fuck it, we'll invent another character who'll stick around for a bit.
The appendix of the show. Easily be excised.
That is one of the best. That's one of the best labels I've ever heard for this kind of thing, and I may very well make it a recurring gag. Like, if we ever get to, like, the end of the show, like, and it's got all this sort of, like, random shit in it, I'll just say, so who in your opinion, Doc, was the appendix of this show? I think you might have invented something there. Incredible.
And who's the spare kidney? That it's gonna hurt losing, but you could give up and you could live without it.
Mm-hmm.
Not as bad as the appendix, but still you could lose.
Oh, right.
If we're going to talk about the beating heart and the soul of the show and such, like, why not bring in other internal organs who are neglected in these metaphors?
Yeah. Who is the left testicle of the show?
Ginty. Easily.
I mean, I you know what? I'm not even going to disagree with you.
Oh, God. I think, I mean, I was going to try to make an argument that, like, Mayu here is a kind of different iteration of the empathy that Chiyuki shows in her story, but, like, this thing that you have introduced, Harada's side of the love and the relationship really does seem to throw a monkey wrench into this. I mean, I can't, like, unless you are assuming that the end of his episode, like, they become a thing and they're into each other and all that, but, like, I don't know if there's enough there for me to, like, just assume that's the case.
There's nothing there. We skip from the end of episode 6 this point, where apparently his soul has gone to the void but is still somehow inexplicably here, and the dummy is there. And why is it there? I ain't got a fucking clue.
Is this all just a mean trick that Ginty's playing on her? I don't know.
I wouldn't put it past him, to be honest.
Yeah. So I don't know if I want to say that now, that she's meant to be another instance of empathy because of that. I mean, it is a very weird turn.
Well, to throw your bone here, maybe that's what they intended.
Sure.
The writers, that is, but ultimately did not effectively communicate.
It's very selfless and everything, but it's a kind of selflessness that is, like you said, I mean, I don't know if you could say one-sided selflessness is the same thing as empathy, because it's like, I don't know if it's, like, predicated on her understanding him or her thinking about him. I mean, she's thinking about him, but is she thinking about him in the same way Chiyuki's thinking about, like, I can't take away someone's life because they have other people they love, they deserve to live, they deserve a shot at life, to, like, be cherished by other people, and da-da-da-da. Or is she just, like, thinking about him as, like, an object she can have, Mayu, to Harada? And that seems different.
She never learns, like, what he actually did. Like, she has ideas from what the gossip rags say, from what I recall for episode 6, but that's it. And that's not the same as knowing someone in person. Like, even if, like, there's a difference between having a gossip rag say this person is, like, a lecherous, like, harlot or whatever, and having that person then admit that to you and then offer them, like, their feelings and thoughts on that.
Yeah.
even if ultimately she gets that confirmed, word for word as what that rag says, there is a perspective to be offered from that is valuable and meaningful. But none of that's there. Harada is as much the crash test dummy in this story as he is like in terms of like his utility and his agency as he appears in the final episode that they are both in. And it's really dumb and I don't like it. Because as much as I want to make this spicy take, I again am not of the opinion that was the intent. But that's the only thing I can walk away with from this, unless the entire point was, well, sometimes people make stupid mistakes. Like, well, that's just great. What a complex moral message from this show. Truly, truly, the work of fucking Aristotle right here. Holy shit.
Oh, I do stand by my point that like it's doing this thing of, you know, that making your own choices to define your life is meaningful. And they're not meaningful because they like adhere to any standard outside of yourself. I think we talked about this a lot in Vinland Saga, right? But there's that being self-directed based on your own internal criteria is meaningful to you because it's meaningful to you, or is meaningful because it's meaningful to you. Meaningfulness is not something that's measured by standards outside of your own self. And kind of figuring that out and deciding that to be true is like a lesson that a lot of anime, kind of a theme that a lot of anime emphasize. And I think that's like what they were going for here. But like there's just a lot of other stuff in it that like it's tough to make sense of and reconcile, I guess.
I mean, in the end, if it turned out to be a retelling of what happens to Sayaka in Madoka Magica, then, well, A for effort, I guess. It just wasn't quite as effective as it was there. You remember what happened to her? She made a wish for someone else, but in reality, it was for herself. Right. And it condemned her and resulted in her soul being obliterated.
Sure.
I wonder how these things might overlap. Sorry.
Right, sure. But it's just not presented in that way. I mean, I understand you're taking away that from it, but it's not presented in a way that leads me to believe that the show is like, haha, she got hers. You know, it's more like, you know, bittersweet. Like, you know, she is going into the void, but like she gets to do it on her terms and gets to be with the person she cares about. You know, that's more than most people down there get.
And he gets no say in the matter.
He's gonna go along with it. Yes, he must go along with it. She's a sweet girl, though, mind you. But anyway,
yeah, I mean, compared to the other characters, like she is pretty. Like, I mean, she commit. Like I say, her crimes are being, I don't know, naive. That's really about it. But anyway, so yeah, that's my spicy take.
Thank you for whatever the spice.
Right. Do you have anything else to add? If not, I'm gonna move on to talk about episode 11 and the glorious stuff that happens in that.
At the end of episode 10, I have the word beard in all caps.
You know, you're talking about Oculus's like evil mind-reading flower beard.
Yes, I am. Because that's very strange and I like it a lot. Also, here's my Oculus impression. Are you ready? I've got an Oculus impersonation. That's it. That's the Oculus impression.
That's also about as much as he contributes to the show, really.
I think that's a shot at the end of episode 12.
It's the one on the thumbnail for the Funimation episode entry. You know what? I'll make a quick like side intermission note here about Oculus, and I'm just
Riften.
Like he has like ideas about like, you know, how artists operate. He's presented the show presents him in a sinister way, like he is the villain. I mean, the way he's shot is ominous, the way he talks is ominous. You know, he is, by all accounts of the presentation, a bad person. But that's it. That's all we learn. Like, I mentioned like way back when, like I wondered if the show would reveal like, that there was some sort of elder god running the thing, and it was just basically sending all the souls, regardless of whether or not they were reincarnated or sent to the void, to like if it was actually tricking them and they all went to the same place. And for whatever it's worth about like, the value of that revelation, at least that would have been a revelation, as opposed to this like boneless fucking, introduction of him as a villain. So I'm just utterly confused as to his conclusion, why he's there. And again, this speaks to me to the lack of focus the show had, where, oh, we've got 12 episodes now, let's go a bit wild here. Like, no, you need to have restraint. You need to have a plan. I mean, we only just finished our taxi the other week, and that had one more episode than Death Parade, I will admit. But you know what that also had? It had a really defined, like, structure, objective.
So
yeah, it was rock solid. It was a perfectly formed lattice.
Yes.
And this is just like, we're just going to throw in all sorts of random crap. And
it's like, here's a really good idea. Oh boy, this is a tiny good idea. We have to put it in a really big container and use up so it's stretch it out. Oh, here's a couple more good ideas. Just fill it in with whatever. That's a really harsh characterization of the show, because again, like, I mean, there's like a lot of stuff here that I like, and there's a lot of elements that I enjoy, but yeah, I came away from it pretty cold, as you know by now.
So Oculus, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I think it speaks to the idea that maybe if they'd actually had more time, ironically enough, that they might have fleshed him out into an actual villain. But I mean, you work with what you've got, and they should know that better than most, given that the creators of this show made Death Billiards and proved in that single 24-minute, pilot, the potential value of a full-blown series. And then, well, they did a B- in the end, because some of the episodes were really good and some of them were just utter waste of time and waste of concepts. I'm still salty about the fact they never did the "I've been reincarnated twice" thing.
Right? Yeah. You could maybe argue that fan theory, the two people that came in at the end were Chiyuki and the murder kid reincarnated, because that girl looks like Chiyuki but with orange hair.
No.
Character design is the same.
I mean, I'd also find that a bit sour, given that she literally has just been reincarnated.
Well, I mean, look, what is time in eternity? It could pass in an instant.
Did she get lost
simultaneously?
Did she get lost and visit the hairdressers in like Quindecim? I mean, you telling me there's not? I mean, we find out apparently that there's a laundrette because Mayu gets her clothes washed at some point. They were completely ruined after she peed herself and she turned into a kimono. So they clearly have a place where you can get clothing from, but they must also have a place where you can do your laundry in this afterlife.
I suppose.
Ghost laundry.
Ghost laundry.
Because why not? I mean, when you want your sheets to be white and translucent, what else do you think of than ghosts? Anyway,
do you remember what 02 did with all the laundry? Do you remember that time? Wasn't she like on the roof? And
why are you doing this? Are you playing? Are you playing a death game with me where you're trying to force me to do like the worst possible thing? Are you testing my character?
This is part of your judgment. I apologize.
Right. Let's move away from the anime of yesteryear, the things that we otherwise wish we could forget, but can't.
Let's move on from Oculus, because I have nothing. Just such a nothing burger of a concept and a character.
Complete waste of time. Right. Okay. I'm gonna get. There's a lot to talk about with episode 11.
Someone is probably gonna like tweet us like 6 months from now, or leave a YouTube comment like, well, actually, Oculus, if you know anything about Japanese mythology, he is the and that's all very fair and valid, and it leads to better understanding of the show. It's just like, if you don't know it, I mean, and the show doesn't give you any clue about it. What are you supposed to do?
I mean, if the show wants to market itself as a Wikipedia page, it might as well have actually put itself out there as such, rather than a story that's meant to have meaning, rather than being like buried in some esoteric nonsense. But anyway, hypothetical future comments aside, let's talk about episode 11 and let's talk about all the good things. There's been lots to discuss here, but also this is where I must again bring in the content warning of discussion of suicide. So feel free to end the podcast now if you're not up for this discussion, because we are going to be talking about what happens to Chiyuki. Right. 3, 2, 1, go. All right. So Chiyuki. Well, we find her name out in episode 10, when she starts getting her memories back, and in the end, we find out that what happened to Chiyuki is that she grew up and became a professional ice skater. She became, I mean, maybe she trained under, Yuri Plizetsky. I'm not entirely sure. There's your Yuri on Ice reference. Told you I was going to get one in. Who can say? Who can say? But she became a professional ice skater. She was inspired by the Chavot book to take up ice skating. And we see in detail, her from a young age, learning the ropes, becoming the professional skater she is, winning awards, performing really well, but also making friends, making connections, networking, all that sort of stuff, building a rich life and a rich, group of people around her in the way that a passion can do. And I know this from first-hand experience, not because I've been ice skating. My dalliances of ice skating have ended usually horizontally, as in flat on my face.
Yeah, I had a very bad ice skating experience, and that was enough for me.
But what I do mean by that is I, of course, have met a ton of people through the fighting game community. This podcast, as I've said many times, this podcast is a direct consequence of that, of all things. So I can attest to what happened, to similar things what happens in Chiyuki's history here, in her backstory. And I want to note as well, the show putting emphasis on the fact that it's not just her professional accomplishments as an ice skater, or that it's her passion, but also that she has met people and formed relationships, is actually really important for what I'm going to be talking about soon. But, however, there's an accident. She has an accident on the rink. She injures herself. The specifics are not really important, but what we do learn is that she will never skate again. That's it. It's all over. Like that, done. Her entire life has just been ripped out from under her. There is a period of time in which she does, try to continue. She has a discussion with her mother, and her mother's saying she's very proud of her. And this is where you mentioned, about how I never came to know the people, for which I actually think there is an explanation for that. But I'll get to that in a bit. But in the end, the fact that she is no longer able to skate, that her life has been ripped out from underneath her, and she basically that's all been stolen away from her, is too much for her to bear. And so she takes her own life. So that's how she ended up in Quindescent. Now, this is all actually done, by the way, in a wonderful scene where we see her actually ice skating in Quindescent in her professional outfit. And as she skates, these flashbacks are woven into it. So we see her doing jumps and leaps and such. I don't know the technical term for these, quads, whatever you want to call them. And then in the end, when her knee breaks in the flashback, is when it breaks for her as a dummy. I'll note as well, by the way, and I can't recall if this was on the top of her wrist or the underside here, but you recall that side peeling away?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where she cut herself.
Yep.
So I don't like the fact that she cut herself, but I like the fact that her soul is literally being worn off the dummy through memory of the actual injuries one that took her life, and then another that, and I'm not saying this to be repetitive, took her life, if you follow my meaning.
Right.
Which I think is which is a really, really neat detail. So I'm going to get into what happens into episode 12 in a bit, but I want to talk about a couple of things first. And this is the point where we're going to have a hard discussion here, Doc, which is, do you think the people in her situation, or people who've been who have lost so much like she has, do you think it's not unreasonable that they'd want to do what they did? Because I'll tell you this. I will tell you this for free.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who has been through suicidal ideation, who has been through therapy, Like, I would never want someone to take their own life. I would always argue that we can at least keep trying, to help them through a difficult situation, to give their world, value and meaning and warmth and love. But if I were in her shoes, I really don't think I would have done any differently than her. I think I've done the exact same thing. Because it's just so much of her life has been ripped out from her. And it's not just that. Because even though the show doesn't show this, I had this thing pop into my head where I imagined, like, post-injury in recovery phase, you can see her friends, and this is why, like, her having met these people ice skating is important. Like, Mao said, "Hey, do you want to come watch us at the rink and all that?"
Right.
Trying to be helpful, as good intention. So she goes there, and maybe she's walking with a cane, maybe she's on crutches because she's still in recovery, or maybe she's got none of those but just has a slight limp, whatever you want to call it. But that injury is there; it's present, and she sits down outside the rink and watches them. And she can't go and join them. She's in a different world now. She will only ever observe, just like Chavo.
Right.
Yep. So I cannot blame her for doing what she did, and I cannot even begin to pretend that I would have the inner strength to have done differently, to be quite honest. And this then leads into the big question, which is, I'm a believer in euthanasia. Now, people are going to say, well, euthanasia is for people who are have locked-in syndrome, for example, people who are like more physically incapable than Chuki was, because she can still walk, she can still talk and all that kind of thing. But one would then argue, like, if I believe in that, but I don't believe in people killing themselves, committing suicide, what's the dividing line here? Because I can't help but think to myself, like, I don't blame her for doing what she did, even though it's an absolute tragedy. And, we should do all we can to help her. But I just, I felt it was just so painful, like, what happened to her, like, and how it's just completely, destroyed her life. Like, her passion and her connection to her friends is gone. This, by the way, is why she says, like, I can't understand what humans anymore, because that was the lens and the common ground through which she networked with these people. And I'm not, and I'm not saying, of course, that with that gone, that they didn't have a connection, but, like, it's monumentally difficult, I think, when that thing is gone from you.
Well, I think, your reaction to her suicide is a starting point. I mean, you said it's a terrible tragedy, versus, like, if someone who was very, very elderly and had a terminal illness, or someone who was in an accident who could only live the rest of their life in a vegetative state. I mean, we would see the ending of their lives at their request as a good thing. Like, okay, they're at peace. They're not in pain anymore, and that's because, like, the ability for those folks to have a high quality of life, to fully live and experience, like, love and passion, companionship, all these other things that are rolled into what life is either gone or diminished to such a degree that it might as well be. And in Chiyuki's case, it's not. In Chiyuki's case, she's, and I don't condemn her either. I'm not, like, judging her. And I think it's really important that the show doesn't judge her either. The show is not like, well, you took your own life, so get your ass in the void. Nothing like that. And so, but I think we view it as a tragedy because she has so much more of her life ahead of her. I mean, the amount of time that she devoted to ice skating and the community she created through it and everything like that, she has, like, 5 to 6 times that period of life left where she could cultivate new passions, discover new people, become a new and different person, or cultivate new aspects of her personality and, everything like that. It seems like everything has ended for her. But she has so much life ahead of her and so much of an opportunity to lead a fulfilling life that we view her ending it as a tragedy. And again, I think the show does too, says it's a tragedy, but it also is not looking down on her for doing that. It sympathizes and empathizes with her pain rather than sort of coming down, like, and saying, like, morally you've done a bad thing. And I think that is, like, a smart and good and wise thing for the show to do.
Definitely. because I think speaking from my own perspective and my own history here, like part of the reason, I think a big reason why a lot of people take their own lives is because they feel there is no future for them at that point,
Sure.
in one form or another. And I mean, with the best will in the world, people can speak to the platitude of, there are always other things that you can find, which is true. I'm not going to
Yeah,
say
it's
that's
more
wrong.
than a platitude. It's the
Yeah,
truth, but it can
maybe
sound
that's
in the moment it can sound hollow, and that's what, like, if that's all you have to offer someone, like, that's that
it's
can
a
be
hard
cold
sell.
comfort. Yeah, yeah. There needs to be more. That person's going to need more from their family and friend community than just that.
Yeah. I think the thing that I was just trying to juggle in my mind was whether or not, like, how I felt in response to this, like, that is it, like, because the show makes a measure of, like, the person's quality, like, a life well lived. I mean, in the end, Chiyuki decides not to come back to life. Like, so she accepts her death and accepts her premature end, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there was ever
Um,
really the opportunity for her to come back to life.
no,
You know what I mean?
although, yeah, not certainly not without the cost of another person
Well, I
in
think that was
turn.
all. I think that was all a construct.
You think it wasn't even going to be on
Yep.
the cards? Period.
Yeah, I think
Hmm.
him giving her the clam button is like.
Oh, you
I
mean the
mean,
PlayStation Move?
yes, exactly. uh, to me, it's like, okay, we're in a game again, and then when and that's why
Ah,
everything falls away. Like, everything is shown to be a big facade once it gets taken to an emotional pitch so high that Decim begins to weep. Like, then he can't maintain the illusion anymore. And
yeah, I hadn't considered that. I legitimately thought that he was offering her like an actual out.
so I
Um,
think that's like the final sort of hurdle, right? Like, will you, like, for reasons that maybe you consider, and I don't know where I come down on like how this works morally, but the way I walked away from it was seeing this choice between, like, choosing, like, what is good for you at the expense of other people, and that could seem like a very justified choice, but in the end, Chiyuki couldn't do it, and like that is like that heart of empathy that she has is like the the thing the show wants you to know, and it's like the mark of her is like this really really great person, is that, like,
yeah.
even you have like the equivalent of God standing there going like, it's cool, man. Don't worry about it. Just kill someone. No one will
I mean,
notice. And she's like, no, I can't do it.
when you say no one will notice, like the show makes reference to the fact that, and whether or not this fact is true or not, again, isn't actually necessarily what's most important, rather than the points making, which is 7,000 people dying. What, every minute was it, or something like that, or every hour?
Something like
I'm
that.
assuming it's something every minute. I'm assuming, but that's your quantity. It doesn't refer nothing to the qualitative nature, the texture of people's lives. I was just curious. Like, I was trying to reconcile my thoughts because I thought, like, I don't blame her, but I don't want it to go on. Like, how do I get this? Because, but I suppose again we kind of have to look at it just as being her rather than like, it's like what I said about Odd Taxi, where it's a case study rather than necessarily making broad judgment. At least that's one way of reconciling it, perhaps. But anyway, I really like how all that was handled. Regardless, I thought that it was really. I like that it wasn't just as I say about the fact that she couldn't ice skate anymore, but also that the common ground as she saw it between her friends, the thing that brought them together, was now lost to her. It wasn't just as simple as, oh, I can't do it anymore. Which I thought was really, really well done. And I think explains her point about that she says to her about, like, I can't understand other people, because that's the lens through which she understood those people. And that doesn't mean she's right, of course, but rather I think she's forgetting that people can just understand each other without a common framework of like a shared passion. It's just what she's always known.
Yeah, well, I mean, so what really rang false to me about it was, so I understand Chiyuki pre this Death Parade show thinking that, right? She's like, uh, every ice skating is everything. I put everything in it. All these other relationships that are supposed to be more important. These people are basically just strangers to me compared to like how I feel about skating. And skating's gone, and now I'm just surrounded by strangers. I don't know anything. I don't know myself. I mean, she's so vehement about it. Like, people don't understand each other. It's wrong to try to understand each other, which is like another really big step. What I don't get is like, what makes it ring false, rather. I get it, but it makes it feel strange, is Chiyuki through the whole Death Parade show. Like, I mean, she becomes this proponent of the need for human beings to understand each other or to be understood. Like, because that's the whole gripe with the judgment system, is how can you judge someone? You don't really know them. You don't understand them. Like, just seeing a person's memories is not enough. Just seeing how they act in this horrible situation is not enough to understand them. Like, it just is weird that the Chiyuki that like hugged Murder Kid in order to stop him from hurting unnecessarily, causing suffering, would then 2 episodes later say it's wrong to understand each other. Like,
well,
what I mean, there's like a, phenomenally speaking, all those memories have just come back to her brain. So
like, that's it.
That dump has happened, but it doesn't mean that the other stuff goes away. So I don't know. And I mean, she takes it back. She takes it back.
I think it's entirely because her memories were absent that she was still able to come back to the core idea. I mean, if you think about it, like, the idea of being able to relate to other people just purely through empathy and not needing the context above it as an additional layer, to me makes a lot of sense. Like, if you think of it in a visual way. So no wonder, like, when the memories are stripped away and she's able to see things more clearly through, like, with that gun and just her soul in there, if you want to call it that. I don't think that that's necessarily a contradiction in the show, but rather I think it makes sense that with the memories absent for a time, it allows her to realize about.
Of course, absolutely, like that, and that's growth. But then she goes back on it and says it's wrong for people to understand each other. In the present moment, she says that to Deshou in the ice skating rink. And I just feel that that's bullshit because she has learned that that's not correct.
Well, I hear you, but I think I'm willing to allow it just because, again, she does change, and I think it's because of the immediacy of getting all that back. It's a lot to deal with.
But it's like treated as this like big deal. You know what I mean? It's treated as this important revelation about her. Like, there's a conclusion that she's come to after everything she's known. And I hate it. I think it is like really, it just hurt that episode for me.
I suppose I see what you mean
because of how important it is.
Yeah, I think I see what you mean because, I mean, we're talking about like memories going back, but like there are the memories she's already made as well.
Yes.
So I see where you're coming from, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. But anyway, I'm going to move on from talking about that now, and I want to talk about something else that happens in episode 11. I think, or rather, a way that episode 11 is constructed, I think, is amazing. Okay. So I talked previously in the other podcast we did about the choice of games, where I said, why the fuck is this Twister? Like, for example, I was like, what the fuck's going on here? Now, we only actually have one more death game, which is Trump, which is not about being a psychopath running a country, but rather is, of course, the card game of Trump. Now, I'm not going to talk... Yeah. I'm not going to talk about that at length, but I'm bringing this up as to analogize here because in the same way that when you make a show about games of some description, your choice of game is important. When you make a show or even an episode that is about a character and the sport that they take part in, the choice of sport is also important. I mean, we've talked before about the idea that sometimes shows that feature sports quite heavily can, you either they're technical manuals of sorts, I don't mean that to be derogatory, but of course you have to go into the technical elements, or they are character studies through which the sport is informed at, it becomes metaphor for what's going on. You know, a character, like, how many times have we seen, or like you can imagine a shonen show where it's about baseball and the character finally overcomes the inner doubt they felt and lands that home run, and it is, you know, the actual real world action or like the real world event that symbolizes their inner conflict being resolved and this newfound source of strength.
Yeah, the sport is like a context to show something about the characters. Yeah.
And so this is where I think the decision to make Chuki an ice skater is actually kind of brilliant.
Okay.
Now, because again, in theory, as much as I said about, like, you know, picking the games, like, you could have, in theory, picked any sport for her. In theory. I mean, at the end of the day, what the actual story is about, of course, her being injured in such a way she can no longer take part in it. So why ice skating specifically beyond the Chavot connection? And if Chavot is indeed not a real fairy tale, it could have been anything. You know, it serves the needs of the story at the end of it. So what is the need here? And this is the thing that I came to the conclusion about. Ice skating, as I understand it, is about finding and creating moments of beauty from the razor thin edge, literally, of course, you know, and of being on the ice, of precision, of operating on the thinnest of margins and creating so much grandeur from that. And therefore, what a perfect metaphor for seeing the complexity of people's lives and why Chiyuki is so well suited to being in the role she is as a companion to Desim in making those judgments. Why she is the one who can see all this complexity and point that out to him, because she has lived a life engaged in this passion of hers of creating beauty from precision, from living on the knife edge of skating, you know, where one mistake, one time things left right, it just becomes, you know, it all goes wrong. And so I think that's actually such a brilliant metaphor and visual context for explaining why she is the person she is and why, you know, and backing up her ability to see the nuance. I think it's pretty fucking amazing. And that's why I'm so glad it was picked.
That's, you know, I had not thought about that at all. That's actually quite brilliant. So kudos to you, Death Parade.
Yeah. I'm not saying that couldn't have been accomplished with other precision sports, of course. But rather, I also think that ice skating can have this kind of melancholy to it as well, depending on how it's presented.
Oh,
that I think works well here, given the circumstances.
Yeah. It's tough, though. I mean, another individual sport that produces, like, I mean, I guess you could think of maybe ballet, maybe gymnastics, like that, you know.
Ballet would work,
but there's then you kind of lose the element that you're talking about of being on a thin mark, being close to disaster all the time. You know, you can be close to messing up your routine, but in ice skating, you're close to physical harm.
Yeah, and creating, like, you know, those moments of wonder when you do like pirouettes and all that from like the most the most smallest of, like, you know, margins, the most precise jumps. Like, that's where you find the nuance. That's where you find the brilliance, by making it that precise. And so it's just fucking great.
That's good.
I love it. I will make a couple of other notes though about this. Because I don't have much else to say other than point out. But one, I'm really glad they didn't do the horribly cheesy thing, which was having Desim ice skate with her. I'm actually really glad that didn't happen, because I felt that would have ruined it. Even if it had been done like in the most serious way possible. No, I don't think that would have been appropriate.
Just like frowning.
Yeah. Two, the ice skating is brilliantly animated. It's not Yuri on Ice. Nothing that does ice skating is going to be Yuri on Ice. Good fucking luck with that if you want to try, because you're up against Saya Yamboso, and she don't take no prisoners.
Can you believe that was like only...
That was like a year
later, I know.
Yeah,
Incredible.
like it wasn't too far after Death Parade, was it?
Gosh, no.
But I mean, it looks great nonetheless. It's really well animated. We've got nice close-up shots and everything, and the interstitial, like, or the interspersing of all the flashbacks works really well also. Like, we often see them happen as she is doing these complicated maneuvers, which only further proves my point that we're talking about like the moments of life that happen when you're, you know, in the middle of this kind of moment, like kind of thing. This feels very like copacetic with it. But lastly, I mean, I'm gonna be honest here, like the revelations that happen with Chuki like feel very back-ended in this show. And I feel like maybe I like this scene a lot, but I feel it'd be even better if it like we had grown to know her more and got to know a little bit more about her as time went on. But nonetheless, much in the same way as I felt about the end of episode 3, minus the creepy element of you know, like it felt like a really wonderful last hurrah, like one last time for her to be able to do this. It touched me a little bit. I was really happy to see her doing it and enjoying it. So yeah, I thought that this choice for ice skating, this backstory for her, the whole links to Chavot and everything like that, all of it was probably, in my opinion, the best moment of Death Parade. And I think it goes to also reinforce one of its points that ties back to what I was saying earlier, which is, and indeed the thing we'll talk about with the numbers in a bit, is a life is defined by its quality and not by its length necessarily. And so even though Chiyuki in the end doesn't, she gets reincarnated, but she doesn't get to go back to stay with her mother. She just, like, there's no returning for her at this point. Like, even though her life did end prematurely, it was still filled with wonderful moments. It was still a life well lived, a life, you know, in which she took inspiration, became like a talented performer, and also a genuinely good person, as evidenced by what she does in Quindecim itself. So,
are you saying that the moral of Death Parade is life is not measured by the number of breaths we take?
Oh no!
But by the moments that take our breath away.
Where are you quoting this from? Where do I remember this?
Cheesy, like internet or like the live, laugh, love type of deal.
Fucking hell!
It's not about.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if
we take?
Can you imagine if Quindecim just put live, laugh, love at the back of the bar?
Yes, that would be amazing. Incredible. That's
no,
a Ginty's.
Yeah, Ginty would totally have live, laugh, love.
Yes.
But no, in all seriousness, like, I mean, it is a fair point to make. And I think that speaks to also one of the things I think Death Parade says about how we look at death is that even if the death is premature in the long run of our lives, like, you know, that doesn't mean that the life that was led is suddenly like lost all value. We have to remember the good things that came along. And I think that works.
Yes. Yes.
I will, however,
totally. I agree.
I will, however, add the caveat that all of the stuff I'm talking about right now that really works in this episode is the thing that I scream at the top of my lungs that I wish the show had done all the way through. When I talked to you previously about the idea of not telling a Death Parade story with the detectives, what we see with Chuki is a Death Parade story because it is about how we deal with death, how we deal with remorse, looking back at our life, hindsight. How do we reconcile all this? That to me is what it felt. Death Parade felt like it should have been about. Now, I grant that's my perspective. Doesn't make it necessarily true. But I just really wish it had been that good all the way through because I think it could have been fucking magnificent if it held true to that quality level from start to finish. But never mind. We got what we got, and we still got that, which was good. And
it was good.
Yeah. And the final thing I'll mention.
I like the detective story the most. It was so good. I was really into how dark it was and how gritty and like, I mean, to me, like that kind of bit at the end where everything is revealed is like the first part of the sentence, the antecedent that episode 12 kind of finishes. Like, it really lays some shit out, you know, about like theories of like moral agency and how like how valuable Chiyuki thinks empathy is, no matter what. And I mean, all this stuff, and it's done in a really, I thought it was done in a really, I don't know, it was grisly, and I liked it. I don't know, I was super captivated by that whole story. Now it probably should have happened earlier in the show, and then given more time for the rest of what was to follow. But I mean, let's just take away the Decim versus Genti fight scene. There's a thing you could excise from the show.
That could be put in a cannon and fired out to the ocean for all I care.
Nothing. Had nothing to do with nothing.
Although, if you were making a much longer show, or you were doing something that was much more like let's just hypothesize it. Let's say you were making Death Parade, but Chiyuki wasn't in it at all, and it was simply a competition between like the various bartenders. Like you would have Jinty, you would have Decim, maybe you'd have another two, and
Stingray.
Basically it was Jill Stingray, yes. And it was a competition between all of them, like on who could provide the best, most efficient service, where it makes it like the afterlife element more jokey and less serious. Fine, then you can fit the fight scene in, and then the show itself would be fun in its own right. It would be a very different show than what we have right now. But that is also, again, tying back to one of the main criticisms of Death Parade, which is it has an identity problem. I don't think it knows what it wants to be half the time.
We should call this spinoff Cheers, You're Dead.
Where everybody knows your name, because they're all God. Ah, dear.
It's written on your tombstone. Hey. Very dark humor. God.
Like they ask Fonzie for judgment, but he does the thumbs up or thumbs down. Hey or nay.
That's right. He's the next arbiter.
Oh God. The final thing I'm going to mention is this as well, and it's with respect to the numbers thing, because I think even though it seems obvious, like what happens in episode 12 where Chiyuki comes to the revelation that like 7,000 people dying a minute or whatever. If I kill one of them somewhere, what does it matter? But I think that it's a really good thing to be reminded of, that we as human beings don't tend to deal with large numbers very well.
No.
I mean, look at billionaires. Yeah. When are you going to end world hunger, Jeff? Fucking do it. Do it, Jeff. Do it.
Are you going to create a company that doesn't have a racist work culture, Elon?
When are you not going to be a wanker, Elon?
Did you see they came out the other day? Like, there's a couple different people that have won lawsuits because Tesla bosses were just being super duper racist to them.
I mean, I just personally feel bad for Elon when he's going to try and file custody papers for his kid with Grimes, and he's going to be like, well, I've got to go to the character map to write this name out, haven't I? What a tit. Anyway, beside the point. We don't handle big numbers very well. I mean, of all the things I'm going to quote right now, and I know this is paraphrased from a different philosopher, but I can't recall where it originally came from, but in fucking Red Alert, of all things, Command and Conquer Red Alert, there's a mission in which Joseph Stalin says something to the effect of, when you kill one, it's a tragedy, but when you kill a million, it's a statistic. And, jokey Command and Conquer stuff, whatever might have happened in that's true. Sure. If you read a news story about a woman who is murdered, like a singular woman, that is going to be more effective than finding out, there were 30,000 women killed by disease or whatever. Like, we don't handle big numbers well. And so that also, I think, informs so much thinking where I don't know these people personally, so I don't give a shit about them. Or maybe I'm a politician and I'll, do something crazy like, deducts their benefit payments for no good reason. Thanks, Tories. Dickheads. Anyway. But I like the reminder here that because of all the people we've seen for the good and the bad, that you can't know for certain about the people's individual lives. I mean, this, funny enough, is actually kind of a parallel to Odd Taxi now I think about it, where even though we, all these people were connected around us, Odakawa got to know quite a lot of them, but didn't end up knowing all of them in all of their detail, especially not Sakura, whatever her name was at the very end, the actual murderer. And in turn here, like Chiyuki, like one person of 7.8 billion whatever. But that's just the numbers. It speaks nothing to the fact that, even if they were living the worst, like most valueless life possible, it's not her life to take. That life still has a value in it. And I think that's a great thing for the show to end on as a reminder, and also just reaffirm its own message that, well, we have to look at the whole of each person's life and all of the richness and texture to it and all of the events and the details and the context. We can't simply reduce its numbers. We can't be like what Oculus says, much as I think he was ultimately peripheral, where he was just basically wanting to turn in some sort of gristle mill.
Yep.
Why? I have no idea, but whatever.
No, I'm super into this. It's a message that, like I said this at the top, even that the way that they're bringing home their message of empathy really does resonate with me. It's the part of the show that does the most because of the infinite worth. That's right. Infinite worth of each human life. I mean, it's why I think the logic of utilitarians, it just makes me rankle. The like needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Well, like the few are these real living, breathing people also. You know what I mean? There are Chiyukis among them. There are like people with, families and mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, everything. So like, I love this, the way that they do this, like, Deshou presents that kind of, frames the state of things that way. Like so many people die. It's just going to be another, who cares? Like, but you could choose to devalue this one life and you gain everything back that you wanted. And she just doesn't, because it's just feels so wrong she can't do it. She can't make the choice. It is interesting that in the end, she's like, you do it, but I can't do it. She's like, press the button. I can't press the button. But setting that aside, I mean, in full agreement with you about this message in the show. I think it is great. And it is the thing that the show got most right for me.
Yeah. I mean, also, it's just really nice to see Deshou try to do his own remake of It's a Wonderful Life. So, hey, there we are.
Are we done with
I'm
talking
right.
points?
I'm right. We're done. On that note, we're going to wrap up, I suppose. Right. Well, in that case, then let's get to rating the episodes and the show as a whole, I guess. Well, I mean, I'm actually going to give 3 ratings here, to be quite blunt, because fuck it. I don't care.
Okay.
I will give episode 11 on its own the full 5 out of 5 quads ice skating maneuvers, because it is the perfect synthesis of well-intentioned use of the sport in question, the idea behind it, and all of the wonderful implications thereof. And it was great seeing Chiyuki like having that one last hurrah. Like, I think it was pretty much damn near flawless as far as its intentions went, and also in how it was executed and like animated. If only the rest of the show were like that, my overall feeling on it would be a lot higher. With respect to the final block of episodes, I will... Christ. I feel like this is one of those things, like, when you hear like about averages and you remember that averages are skewed inherently by the lower and upper bounds of their ranges, so they're not actually the most useful statistic in the world.
Yes.
I am ultimately going to give this block of episodes 4 out of 5 destroyed air hockey pucks, because even though I didn't really care about episode 9 and I thought the Mayu and Arada stuff was just a complete waste, everything else pushed it up for me and elevated the show, or at least this block of episodes, enough that I didn't care in the end. Like, my not wanting to talk about the stuff in, episode 9, for example, or a little bit more detail about Mayu and Arada beyond my spicy take, is not so much a function of me like actively disliking it, but rather I feel there's much more interesting stuff going on in the rest of the episodes, if you know what I mean. So that's why I feel like it brings it up. And then I suppose at the end of it all, after all of this, I'm going to give the entire show 3.5 Memento Mori cocktails out of 5. it desperately needed trimming down. It needed a lot more focus. It needed to really understand what it wanted to be about and stick to that. There are shows and writers who can like weave between comedy and tragedy really well. I mean, Ikuhara, and Utena also being a good use of how fairy tales are woven into stories and all that, funnily enough. But the thing I should also know about Utena and also Penguin Drum, which I was thinking of, is they're also longer than this show, so they have more breathing room to flex between comedy and tragedy, of course. But if you don't have the time or the writing ability to do that, stick to your guns. And as I say, like in my opinion, this entire show should have been of the same vein in terms of its writing quality and the amount of thought and effort points as episode 11. And if it had done that and maybe cut its length down in half, I think it would have been a masterpiece. But as it is a mishmash of stuff where the creators were given license to make 12 episodes and they went a bit too far with it and didn't really have any sense of self-restraint or control for much of it. So it's a shame. It's a shame.
Yeah, the director would go on to make incredible work after this. Yeah. This block of episodes, I am going to give. I'm gonna give it. I think as a whole, 3.25 corns uniting into a single corn to spend eternity in the void together. Yeah. These episodes left me cold at the end, which is very weird. I was so sure I would like the show going into it, but I just think this block of episodes demonstrated to me that, like, yeah, that it was not going to be the kind of show that was more than like kind of interesting, competent exercise. Like, it really, I think, should have gone beyond acknowledging that the status quo of whatever this is bad. I've just seen too much of that, and it's a good first step, but I just needed more. And then some of the other things that it said toward the end, I thought are said better elsewhere. I think the show as a whole, I will give a better rating. I'll also give it 3.5. Darts thrown in your eyeball or whatever out of 5. I don't know.
It's the half dart, just the needle, and then they just shoot.
Yep. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Does that count? Does that count as bullseyes? I
think that there are some really good individual stories here. I just think, as a whole, it's just lacking a punch for me. There are things I like about it, things I like about the characters. There are themes that it conveys pretty well. But I just didn't think that the entire production like rose to level that I expected that it would do. So yeah, I mean, it was. I don't regret spending my time with this show by any means. But like, I think it just fell a little bit flat for me.
Fair. I mean, it's actually kind of funny because we've had disagreements about various elements of the show throughout, but we ended up rating it the same in the end, which is kind of curious, but also kind of great because we, when it came to Odd Taxi, our final second stream show, we were pretty much unanimous all the way through to the end, with maybe one mild exception in terms of its quality. This has been all over the map. Like, I should put this on a line chart, and you could just see it like turning into this like really weird sine wave thing for both of us on opposite sides. Yeah. And yet we ended up rating it the same, and that's kind of fascinating.
Because you loved episode 11, and I was very like lukewarm on it.
Well, Hey, that's fair enough. I mean, I think that leads into my next point, and the thing I'll end our discussion of Death Parade on, which is this. I just want to remind people who might be listening to this podcast that ultimately our opinions on this show are ours as critics, and we don't mean to devalue anyone's experiences in watching the show, and especially if it was of a positive help to them at a time they really needed. Because that's the impression I get, I think, from people saying that Death Parade was really good. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that everyone's saying that it was really good because it helped them when they were in the bad patch. I think some people genuinely think it's really good. And you know what?
Of course.
Fair play to you as well. But rather, what I mean to say is this: like, at the end of the day, even if I ultimately found it like uneven and all the other problems I've talked about, if you liked it, that's great. And I'll tell you what, if you liked it and it was there for you in a dark time in your life and reminded you of your own value as a person and the fact that, you've got to keep on going on all that, like there's a lot to live for. Then, as I've said, no rating that I could ever give in our little arbitrary system would ever adequately describe the value of this as therefore. And that's not just, of course, true of Death Ray. That's true of so many other shows. I mean, going back to Wonder Egg, which we, of course, really eviscerated in its special episode. I mean, if that show helped you through a rough spot again, who are we as two random chuckle fucks on the internet or anyone else I might to tell you you're wrong for liking it because it helped you in a tough spot? So if that's been the case for you, listener or viewer, I'm really glad that that's the case. And please be assured that we don't mean to be mean-spirited towards anyone's reactions to the show, but rather just that we're looking at it as critics. And, a critic can only go so far in expressing value, but for each person individually, as this show has proven many times, or rather tried to message us to us about, each person's experiences have their own value. And if this show, as I say, was helpful for you in the dark time, that's what matters most.
Yeah, very well said. Well articulated. And I, for one, welcome disagreement, about this. I welcome people's arguments, opinions, be it on YouTube comments, on Twitter, on Discord, wherever. Tell me and Shadon why we're wrong. And I would love to hear what your experience is with the show, what you like about it. And I mean, not even just necessarily to argue with you unless you want to, to engage in argument with us and kind of debate over points. But if you just want to share your experience with the show, I love to hear that also. Because I mean, art is this thing that context of experiencing of it matters so much. so get in touch. Let us know how dumb we are and how great Death Parade is.
Indeed. And speaking of how you can get in touch with us, to round out, you can find us at Warui Deshou on Twitter. You can find me at Shadon1010 on Twitter as well. Doc, to speak for you, you can find yourself at The Subtle Doctor. If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to support us, we again no longer have a Patreon, so don't worry about looking for that. But you can go to Ko-Fi or Coffee or whatever. You can become a aficionado of Warui Deshou by donating to us. ko-fi/Warui Deshou. Pop over there, drop us a tip in. That would be hugely appreciated. And if you're, of course, listening to this on our other services, for example, Spotify or Apple Music, all the places where we may be found, a quick rating, give us the full stars. Think of it like the end of a Mario level. You want to get all the stars at the end of a Mario level, and we do too. So give us all the stars, all the likes, all that sort of stuff. It really helps with our discoverability, and we would hugely appreciate that. But otherwise, this is the end of Deshou the Third, which has been its own little ride in its own way. I mean, I don't think covered. I don't think you would disagree with me, Doc, to say that the best thing we've covered on Deshou the Third has been Sho Genriko Raku Shinjo, of course.
Oh, by some distance, my friend. That was just so freaking amazing.
It was indeed. But I want to give a special commendation to another show that we covered that really restored my faith in hey, maybe I need to give things more chance and more benefit of the doubt. And also that seemed to be created in such a way as to actively disprove its own initial setup, like it was growing up in real time along with its lead character. And I am, of course, referring to bottom tier character Tomazaki.
Oh my god,
which
that's right.
which by its end was really damn solid.
Yeah.
And it started off in the most like limp of places, but then in a way, again, I can't help but shake that this is somehow intentional. Like we started lame like the main character, and we got great by the end. It really surprised me in how much it matured as a story, in how it actually started tackling some really interesting stuff. It didn't fall for the obvious pitfalls as far as the anime material is concerned. I mean, there were still problems with it by all means, but I really feel like it deserves noteworthy praise for being one of the few shows I can think of which I've watched which started off bad and was pretty good by the end, as opposed to what we often find, which is where they start off good, if not great, and kind of peter out, fizzle out towards the end. So yeah, kudos to top tier character Tomazaki as far as I'm concerned. But I mean,
and don't forget Girls' Last Tour.
Of course, yes.
Them of the long faces.
GLT is a wonderful little show, and
a delight.
I honestly have such affection for it for just being so unique. Absolute joy. So we've covered some really good stuff on Deshou the Third. We've not mentioned everything we've covered on this, of course, but I mean that's some great stuff. And this,
I think we might have.
And is that literally it? Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean it's only been around for about we only did the format for a year.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But it'll be what it'll be. And in turn, I would like to thank our patrons who supported us throughout time and made that possible. That's a lot of money to give a pair of dudes to talk about anime, but we really appreciate it. And also in turn for suggesting the shows we covered.
Yes, indeed.
Hugely appreciated and humbled by that.
Massively grateful to everyone who has contributed in any way and everyone who has listened to these. So
indeed.
And but the pod goes on.
Yeah, the show does not go on, but the pod does. So we will be back next week with the finale for Sunny Boy somehow. I don't know how we're going to cover all of that in one go, but we'll make it work.
And the last stream of thought,
It'll be quite the experience. And then in the near future, in November, will be the commencement of our new set of pods, where we'll start talking about anime and non-anime less frequently, but better.
That's right. That's the
plan.
So the quality quantity, split returns again. You spoke of it earlier. It's happening, and it's being evidenced in the podcasts that we're doing. Fewer, but as you said, better, beefier, more substantive.
Indeed, absolutely. And I also will start attempting to do content, solo content on the regular as well to fill the gaps. Keep an eye out for that when that starts up. Probably talking about individual episodes of anime that I've seen. Like I remember recently seeing, for example, one of the really good episodes of Kekeki Shoujo that just had my brain going. I was like, "Oh, I'll talk about this." That kind of stuff, basically. But anyway, we'll not talk about the future right now. We'll instead leave it there. So thank you, dear listener. Thank you, dear viewer, for your time. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion of Death Parade from myself and Doc. Please take care, stay safe, look after yourself. Hope you're all doing well. Despite everything that might be going on in the world right now, hoping for the best for all of you from the bottom of my heart. And as we often say on this podcast, and we just like to, end with a little flourish because it's from a franchise that we adore, but also the message is true and fair. Embrace everyone to the ends of the universe. Good night.
Bring back the brothers.